Good evening, everyone. Tonight is June 15th, 2022. It is 6:04 p.m., and this is a joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting for the City of Columbus. I'll remind everybody, please pull your microphones up close when you're talking, this will be a lot of discussion tonight, so everyone can hear. And the first thing I'd like to ask you is to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would someone make a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
This is Janet. Move to approve the meeting agenda.
And a second.
This is Sue, I'll second.
Is there any discussion or questions on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Does everybody vote, Elizabeth, since it's a joint meeting?
Everyone votes yes, correct.
Then we'll start with
Chris, aye.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Janet, aye.
Barb, aye.
Rob, aye.
Bob, aye.
And Jesse, aye. The ayes have it. How about a motion to approve the August 4th minutes, 2021? I'll make the motion to approve the minutes from August 4th, 2021, Joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting minutes. Is there a second?
This is Janet, I second.
Is there any other questions on the minutes or discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Chris, aye.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Janet, aye.
Barb, aye.
Rob, aye.
Bob, aye.
And on to number 5, I'll make the motion to approve the May 4th, 2022 Joint City Council and Planning Commission meeting minutes. Is there a second?
Jesse, I have a question on that. They have a list of who voted which way or who approved it, and I thought
On which one, Barb? On the May 4th or the August 4th?
the May 4th,
Okay.
and they list each, isn't that the one I was thinking of? Or maybe I had it. Oh, I guess the question was on the left. Okay, I missed my chance. Because I thought Sue Wagaman voted, I thought it was okay.
You're talking about, it is the May 4th one you're talking about.
Yeah, the May 4th one, I had the.
What are you talking about on the equipment transport deal?
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that she spoke out about it, but I thought she approved it, even though she had reservations. Is that correct? Sue? Were you recused?
No, I was not recused, but I don't remember voting.
Well, we didn't vote, but we just stated whether or not we felt it fit.
So when it came to my, when we were going through, I said that I stick with my comments that I read, which says that I believe that there are businesses that do fit, but not this one. And that's in the notes on page 205.
That's not true. You did say, I have to admit, it sounds like you would fit the current ordinance, even though, I mean, you said all the things you said in here. Sorry, I'm not talking into the microphone. You did say, I mean, we brought this up the other day too. I think because you and Shelley both had reservations, but after they presented, you felt like they met our current ordinance, even though we all agreed that the ordinance needed work, which is why we called the moratorium. So I think that was my point the other day too, when I said you did agree with it. And that's how I remembered it. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that,
I think this, I'm thinking the same thing, and it kind of got brought up last night a little bit.
yeah.
Maybe you missed.
Vote on it also.
So I
If
feel
we
like
could
it
go
should
back
be
to the,
correct in the record.
Yeah, can we go back to the video and look at it? Because
Yeah.
I thought I repeated what I put in my comments, which are listed here, that I didn't agree, so.
But I thought we went person by person.
We did.
Okay,
Is-
so
are
then
we-
we
are
don't
we-
want to approve the minutes for tonight. Can
I was
we-
just going to say, is there a motion on the floor?
Yes.
We already
Yes.
passed that one.
But we
Was
didn't
it-
get a second because she brought up
this
this
is the main.
question.
Is this in
Okay.
discussion? Is that,
The May 4th is up discussion.
Yeah.
so are we with, is the motion maker withdrawing their, let's see, is the seconder withdrawing their second and the motion? Because you want further discussion, or do you want to continue the discussion on the minutes based on a review of the tape?
So
That's it.
I think we want to retract the motion and the second and table it until we can take a look at the tape.
Yeah.
So make a new motion.
I don't know who made the motions.
So I'll make a motion that we'll retract our last motion. And we will not act on this, on the new motion until the tape has been reviewed for accuracy. Is there a second?
This is Janet, I second that.
I'll call, any more discussion on that issue? I'll call for the vote, Chris?
Chris, I.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Janet, I.
Barb, aye.
Bob, aye.
And
I
do I
just
wait
want,
for him to come back, or doesn't it matter? Oh, here you
He's
go.
coming.
I just want to point out also a minor typo on number 3, where it says second. Spelled my name Bernaz instead of Barons.
Thank you. Rob, we're voting on reviewing the video of the May 4th meeting, and then whatever we find out, correcting the minutes if necessary.
Okay.
So it's been all the way around, it's up to you? Yes?
Aye. Yep.
And Bob is an aye, and I'm an aye, so we're moving right along.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to step out to grab my minutes. I thought I had them in my packet.
So now we're on to number 6, and this will be a discussion of a non-binding concept plan with John Sawyer. It's pages 1 through 25 and an enclosure. Is John, come on up.
Hi, I'm here remotely on Zoom. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yes,
That's John Sawyer, the owner.
got it?
Yeah, it's me. Yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, but
Yes.
you can speak a little louder, would be easier.
Okay. I have to apologize. I'm doing this on an iPad because my laptop decided to stop working suddenly today. So I'm just improvising as I can right now.
All right, thank you. So, would you identify yourself for the record, please?
I'm Gregory Halling. I'm the professional engineer hired by John to do the engineering on the project. I'm with Windsor Engineers. We have an office in Minneapolis, Duluth, and then also in Battleground, Washington.
All right. And your first name was Wes?
Greg,
Greg. Pull your microphone a little closer and speak right into it, please. So would you like to give us, one or the other, or both of you, a rundown of your project?
John, why don't you start about purchasing the property and some of those things and what your vision is?
Sure.
And I can
Sure.
relate more to engineering and what we've done with the property.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll go through, some of the points on the slides. I think you all have them there. And if you can't hear me, feel free to interrupt, but I'm speaking as close to this as I can right now. I see that you have on the screen our little presentation. This is our light industrial park development proposal. If you go to page 2, the overview, this is something that we are proposing to build. We're an independently owned and operated company. Myself and Greg are working together on this. These are exclusively light industrial properties that we're proposing to build these buildings on this parcel. We don't build any custom buildings or build to suit or anything like that. We like to keep the buildings simple so that we can keep the rent low for small business owners. We maintain, we own, and we operate all of these buildings that we build. We don't build them and then sell them off as parcels or anything like that. So what we're going to show you on the site plan is a parcel of land with maybe 8 or 10 buildings on it eventually, and all of these would be owned and operated by us, not sold off, onesie twosie. The goal here is to provide light industrial space for small business owners, typically 8,000 or 10,000 square feet. Typically, these would be used as contractor warehouses. Sometimes they might be small assembly operations or machine shops, general storage, things of that nature. Anything that's falling under the light industrial designation as it's shown in the Columbus City ordinances. If you move to page 3, I have the site location shown here in that little red box. It's directly south of the Caterpillar equipment dealership there, with the legal description is there on the bottom, and then you can see over on the right, I have a zoomed out view of the Columbus zoning map where this parcel lies as well, and it lies in the light industrial district. There's about 10 acres there. There's probably about 6 usable acres, the rest of it being wetland. If you move on to page 4, currently the surrounding land uses, obviously, as I just mentioned, Caterpillar has a very large dealership directly to the north. There's also some recreational vehicle storage off to the north. There is currently a residential and a farm to the south, and the rest of it is currently vacant and being zoned for light industrial or commercial highway in the near vicinity. So the proposed development that we have right now, we do not have final tenants in mind. The idea here is to build the first of 2 buildings of the entire project and get those rented. We don't have any tenants in mind as of yet, but what our philosophy always has been is if you build it, they will come. Once we get the buildings up, people can see what they're going to be getting, and we rent them that way. And after we have those 2 filled, then we'll build another 2 or 4 more and continue on as demand progresses. Typically, the hours would be similar to what you see in the Caterpillar dealership, maybe 8 to 4 or 7 to 5, things like that, daytime operation, and no heavy manufacturing, no chemicals, nothing like that nature. Sometimes we have customers that request outdoor storage. That's not typical. If we did have something like that come up, we could address that with the council at a later time. Moving on to the next page, this is the proposed site plan that was put together by Greg Holling and his company. Greg, would you like to speak to this a little bit?
Sure. That must be close enough, huh? Just a comment, we have had a survey done of the property and have had the wetland delineated. And so these wetlands that are shown on the plan have been field located. And then we've discussed with the watershed district and believe that that 50-foot buffer that we have shown on there is what they're requiring. Did talk with your planner for a bit today, and he indicated that the city would have probably a 1-rod requirement, but he kind of wondered whether we really needed to do the 50-foot buffer. But we can double check, but our understanding is the watershed is going to require that. Yep. So what we've done, in addition to contacting the watershed district, we did talk or have contacted the highway department. It sounds like we're going to need some turn lanes there for this property, but we haven't completed our discussions with the highway department yet. That is a county road there. So what we've shown is the buildings that seem to fit approximately so that we can have enough room for trucks to maneuver to get in between the buildings. We have a large, the typical building would have a large overhead door on the ends facing towards the center of the aisle. And then they would typically have another one coming in from one of the sides. And typically we're trying to just keep the distance, enough distance between the buildings so that a straight truck or something could use those overhead doors. Some of these areas, we had to have a row of parking alongside the building as well, and so we've shown those. We have shown the 10-foot by 20-foot parking stalls that the city likes to see, as well as the 24-foot wide drive aisles. And then we've shown some trash locations. We might be able to combine those for some of these buildings or not, but we're trying to show what we think will work. We have researched your ordinances and believe that what we've got meets those requirements. We haven't finished landscaping and some of those things, but we believe we've got quite a bit of boulevard area on the front so that the best landscaping could be in there where it's most visible from the road for the traveling public. I believe the house to the south is close enough where we'll have to have some landscaping along there and screening. There's always a potential that there could be vehicles that are not parked inside overnight. So I think, as I talked with your planner today, he suggested that we have a decorative fence between the buildings for any screening, and I think that would probably be the best thing to do, is to show that. That would cover the dumpsters as well as if there was any parking by any larger trucks or something overnight out there, that would still be covered. And then we've done some ponding calculations because we need to filter all the water, so we've got 2 basins shown on the north end of the property. Everything slopes towards the wetland there, so it's the easiest thing is to have the storm sewer go in that direction to the north. The sediment basin would catch the dirty water and clean that up before going through the filtration basin. We have a high water table there, so we would have filtration, not infiltration, meaning that we would have a media filter that the water goes through before it goes out to the wetland. And then I know your planner had indicated that our illustrations show a 4-foot high decorative block wainscot stucco appearance, and I believe it's required to be 6 foot and 30%. In talking with him, I haven't actually discussed this with John yet, but one question that I came up with as I talked with the planner, it's our understanding that that same type of exterior appearance is required on all 4 sides of the building. And with the way the buildings are here, and with Ziegler in particular having their outside storage in front of us, that was one thing that we wanted to, or I thought would be good to discuss, see what your thoughts were on that. Your planner did indicate that the only way we could get around that would be to do a PUD, but obviously the city would have to be in favor of that process. I don't know if John is, or if there's a lot of additional expenses for planning and so on to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up, see if the council or planning commission members had any thoughts on that.
I don't think we have thoughts on it tonight because we're just absorbing your information.
Okay.
But we will take note, everybody, and in as we discuss it and work with our planner, I think we can come up with the right solution for you,
Okay,
whatever it is.
sure. John, do you have any other comments? I know we've gone and looked at storm water and placement of catch basins and so on, and that'll be, this is a very flat site, so we're going to need to add a lot of catch basins and run storm sewer to get the storm water down to the pond.
Yep.
And then we realize that there's sewer and water available here. Any questions to what mentioned thus far, or thoughts that any of the members have? We would appreciate it.
I'll have one for our administrator, Elizabeth. So this use fits within the zoning code, correct? Or how well does it fit, or can you explain?
Mr. Mayor and Planning Commission members, this is a little bit of a unique proposal in that he's proposing to have buildings, and these buildings are going to be rented to different types of groups, and they've identified the types of groups that they would like to rent to. And so I think we're going to have a larger discussion amongst our city staff exactly how we would administer the conditional use permit. Because in the past, when we've had different tenants, there's always been, every tenant may not have the same conditions. If you're looking at a conditional use permit, and if you have different types of uses, you might want different conditions. And so we'll have to work with the developer to really identify how we're going to issue a conditional use permit or a plan unit development, whichever he chooses, to go down this road, and whether there'll be uses that they can absolutely put in the buildings, and if it's under that umbrella, then they're able to rent. But if it's outside those uses that we specifically give the conditional use permit for, then he would have to amend it. Or we take the route that each building has their own conditional use permit and abide by conditions under each. And I don't know if Dean has a plan already or if he has a solution, but I know when we've talked about this type of proposal before, we've always had those on the table.
Thank you.
This is Bob with the Planning Commission. Elizabeth, I also have an administrative question, and it relates to the topic of CUP. When I envision this type of development, to me, it's a PUD, and then it's a individual CUP for each individual lease. And otherwise, and is this CUP consisting of all 8 to 10 buildings, or is it just the 2 that we're talking about initially? And because there could be a distance of time between where different things can happen, ordinances change, different things like that. And so to me, it clearly looks like it should be a PUD, but then a CUP for each individual lease. That's how I conceive it in my own mind, and that's how I've seen it consistently across different cities and organizations that have done that in the past. So it's an administrative question, and you did attempt to answer it, recognizing that there are answers yet to be determined.
So that's a planner question and an administrator question, correct?
Yeah, and again, those are the 2 options, and we haven't discussed it as a staff level as to which one we would recommend, but I have seen both formats, and it is true what Commissioner Behrens had said. It's easiest to administer that way because then each business owner understands what conditions, they have to abide by. Whereas if you have an umbrella one, it's kind of, when you have different uses changing all the time, they might not be as uniform applied. And so it's somewhat more difficult to do that. I've seen it that way, though. On Lake Drive, there are several conditional use permits that will allow several uses, and they allow rental. And as long as they rent to those uses, it's one conditional use permit, and it covers all. Again, when you have different tenants, it becomes troublesome when you thought you were getting trucks and you get buses instead. CUP doesn't say buses, it says trucks. But, so sometimes it gets blurred, let's say, it becomes gray. And I don't know, Dean, if you have any other issues to, or options to add.
Dean, can you hear us? We can't hear, we can.
Unmute. There we are.
All right.
Yes, I've been listening, and I would agree with the comments so far regarding options. That's yet to be determined. And so I don't think there is one umbrella permit that can list all of the potential uses that may occur. It's not impossible. But I think, as the city administrator indicated, we have other properties that are owned by one individual, leased by several tenants over the years, and we have issued new conditional use permits each time. And so I think we just have to play that option out if and when we get a formal application and make recommendation to the planning commission and the council what we think works best.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question on that too, Art? If you had a conditional use permit each time, would that actually have the name of the renter as part of the conditional use permit, or would it be the owner? Because, you know, you could have the same use, but a different renter too. And anyway, just trying to muddy the water a little bit more. How's that?
Good job.
Mr. Mayor and Planning Commission members, so a conditional use permit runs with the land. And so, again, it's about a use and not an owner. And there lies in some of the details, you know, how do you kind of look at that? So I'm not sure, you know, you had some broad topics or broad areas and or uses at the beginning of your presentation. And as soon as you make that list, I guarantee you the first one in the door will not be on the list. It's happened to us. So as soon as you write it down, something else comes in. But, you know, you can start out, you know, we can certainly start out with a use. But again, I think as you indicated, there are some deviations that you're looking at with screening. So it might be a path that you choose, that you decide to apply for the plan unit development, the vehicle we use as a conditional use permit. There isn't extra dollars to go through that process. It's just a matter, your application would read differently because you truly are asking for deviations from the code, and you have to outline what deviations from the code you would like. And then in return, you're telling the planning commission and council members, what is it that you're going to do in return for this deviation? You know, are you going to put up a decorative fence that's all wood and it's, you know, your landscaping is above and beyond what is required, or you're going to put, you know, 70% brick on the front and 10% on the back, or whatever it is that you looked at for your deviations that you stated earlier.
Sure. I assume we'd be able to work with staff if we go that route then, to see what is considered something that the council or planning commission would prefer to have in place of something then?
You know, I
Or
think
how
tonight
we-
they'll probably give you some feedback, but certainly you'll be working with our city planner, you'll be working with Frank, our associate planner, and I'll chime in every time again to give my
Okay.
suggestions.
I mean, as part of the PUD, we have to propose something, and it's nice to try to do things that the city wants us to do, you know, because I've mentioned about some of those things about the special type of walls all the way around, and if nobody can see them from the street, the city can't see them while driving by, maybe it's more important to, like you said, maybe the landscaping up front, maybe we do that. But I assume with the PUD, we have to put those down when we submit, and it's just, anyway, any little help we would appreciate.
I have a question, Elizabeth. So if they had a PUD on the whole project, wouldn't it be more appropriate, would it or wouldn't it, so when one business comes to rent the building, he would get an IUP, an interim use permit, so that he has understanding of what the city needs, or what he has to do, what he can do and cannot do. When he pulls out 5 years later and the dentist office moves in, he gets a new IUP for his type of business. Is that correct or not?
I'm going to
Because,
defer to Dean. I've not seen it set up that way, but it certainly appears that maybe we would, make that work. And Dean, maybe, have you seen that model before?
This is Dean. I think you have the ability to use an interim use permit process. However, in our last ordinance amendments, we essentially eliminated most uses that would be common. They're special uses, if you will. And so we'd have to revisit that issue to put a number of interim uses in. It certainly can work.
okay, let me restate
Have to-
that. What I'm trying to accomplish is, so if a CUP goes with the land, with the building and lasts forever. So if they get a tenant in there who turns out to be a bum, how's the chain of command for the city to control the problem? We go yell at them and he says, well, I'm not gonna say nothing, I gotta get my rent. And the guy's making bombs in the back or whatever. So what's the method?
And Mr. Mayor and Planning Commission members, and I think that is something that we'll have to talk about, because I too agree that you have to have a mechanism for everyone to know what the conditions are, but they might not be uniform for every single use. And while there were 3 or 4 or 5 uses that was proposed, they might be all very different. Their contractor shop, as we all know, may have different meanings, but you might have different types of contractors that have different trucks or tools or whatever according to their business. So I think we are going to have a little discussion on the staff level as to what actually the mechanism would be, so that each individual building, the renter is responsible for his activity. Because I know if I was a business owner, I wouldn't want to be responsible for the guy next door. You know what I mean? Their conditions.
Right.
I would want to have my own conditions that I'm in charge of. But in addition to that, I'd also want to know that from a city perspective, that ultimately someone's responsible for the whole property. And the only example I can give to you is the garage condos on Lake Drive. And there you have a conditional use permit over the whole property, but then you have individual owners. And granted, they're all the same use, so we're not having a different use. But again, at least you have one person to go to that's in charge, so that you can maintain the conditions. And then individual garage owners have the ability to have their own garage and decorate it the way they want and put things that they want in there. In this case, because you have businesses, you're going to want to have in individual conditions.
John, this is Commissioner Behrens on the Planning Commission. Can you tell me conceptually how long of these lease agreements would be?
John will have to answer that.
Yeah, hi. Well, that's a really good question. And I guess it just depends on how successful the business is typically. My goal would be to have those leases go forever and have one business in there that never leaves, but that's just not the way life tends to work. So typically it might be, typically a lease would be 3 to 5 years, typically is how we would do it. And then depending on how things are going and what the customer is asking for, we might renew it for another 3 years, or maybe they would go on a 1-year renewal. And you've seen it sometimes where they just want to go month to month because they're uncertain of if they need to move or what the future holds for them. So, with a lot of different businesses, it just depends on, it could depend on the economy, it could depend on market conditions, all sorts of things. So it's difficult to to give you a solid answer on that, but like I said, my goal is to have them there forever. I don't know if that answers
Yeah,
your
you
question.
might want to
Billy.
have somebody there 6 months is too long. And then the next
Right,
guy, you
yeah.
want to be there 60 years.
Right, yeah.
From the
So
city
all kinds of
standpoint as
different-
well as the owner. It's hard to
Yeah,
know.
that's true.
Yeah.
So when you have all kinds of different businesses doing different types of things, there's a big variation.
Conceptually, though, 3 to 5 years would be a good number.
Yeah, yes, it would be. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
This is Janet. I have a question. Have you done one of these projects before? Is this your first one?
In Minnesota, yes, but we've been doing this in Michigan for quite a while. And now I'm out here. And before this, I was kind of involved in apartment rehabs down in the Twin City core area, and kind of getting back to what we were doing originally in Michigan. So yeah, we've done these before. And typically what I put on this presentation is really typical of what we've done in the past, where, there's smaller buildings, 8 to 12,000 square feet. They're very uniform, nothing custom, same kind of tenants, contractors, maybe repair shops, things of that nature. Yeah.
And then my second question is, you had indicated limited or no outdoor storage. What would you envision as limited outdoor storage?
Well,
I mean, are you talking
you know-
about product, or are you talking about raw materials? Are you talking about vehicles, or what?
Yeah,
do you have
it
in
would
mind?
typically be, for example, in the case of a contractor, we have a plumber there that has a lot of like pipes that they can't fit into the building, or they just need to have them outside for a short amount of time to be picked up, or something gets delivered and it sits out there for a little bit, things like that nature. But if you look at the Caterpillar dealership just to the north of us, we have all kinds of equipment outside for long periods of time. That's not what we would envision. A typical, like, for example, a plumbing contractor might have, 2 of their vehicles sitting outside overnight, things of that nature, but not large piles of material for extended periods of time, not a lot of equipment, not large equipment, definitely, small service vans, things of that nature.
And not raw materials like gravel or sand or those kinds of things?
Well, no, that, raw materials like that, that's not typically who we rent these buildings to, especially when you have a small parcel like this with lots of close buildings nearby. I don't think anybody would want to put a pile of sand or gravel in this small space between these buildings. So I don't think that's appropriate. And if you see, as you see, the space between the buildings that we're proposing is not that great anyway. So there's not really a whole lot of room there to begin with. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
This is
Yeah,
Sue.
this is Rob Bush on the council. John, just had a question. You had said in your past, you've done these past developments in Minnesota, or was that in Michigan?
In Michigan, not in
Okay,
Minnesota.
What was your average lease time on those properties in Michigan?
That's again, it's kind of all over the board, but a 3 year, 3 years is usually pretty typical for starting, unless something catastrophically goes wrong with the business from the get-go, or you lease it to somebody and all of a sudden the country goes into a recession and they go out of business right away, and then they can't pay their rent. But 3 to 5 years is reasonable, I think, on a lease like this.
All right, thank you. And then I just had one other question here. What's the makeup of these buildings? It's kind of hard to tell on looking at the drawings, the conceptual drawings here. Are they a pole frame, like a pole barn style? Are they a stick frame, 2x4 style, 2x6, steel framed? Are they structural steel?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have mentioned that in the presentation. These are pre-engineered steel buildings. So it's not a pole barn. It's not timber, but it's red iron is what we call it. I-beams that are pre-engineered by, Butler is one company, but Nucor is another one that makes them. And they're pre-engineered. You put up the red iron, the girts and the girders, and then typically on the outside you can have steel corrugated panels, or in this case here we have textured steel panels that resemble stucco that are insulated. So yeah, these are steel buildings.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
This is Sue. I have a couple questions, and I think the first one is for John, or the engineer. I can't remember what your name is.
Greg?
Thanks. On the drawing, so there's buildings on, there's 2 rows of buildings, and in the middle, I can't tell if that's a driveway or if it's like a road that you would put down the middle.
Yeah, it's basically a private road going down the middle.
Okay. And then my other question, I guess, it might be for Elizabeth, because I'm trying to figure out where on the map this lot sits in that district. So I have this map. So it's in the pink area.
This does in the light industrial area, and as soon as I get back to the site, okay, the site plan. So this lot is directly south of Ziegler. Ziegler is the larger lot, and then there's 2, what I would say, more narrow lots, and one is vacant and one has a house on it. But I'm going to bring up an aerial, so if you just give me a minute, I will bring up the GIS and we can see it.
It's Katie calling from our.
And just while you're bringing that up, my question, it was kind of, because I was thinking it was more towards the middle of the area, and if there was a house on, right to the south, that house isn't on residential property, it's on light industrial property?
It is on light industrial property. The house is legal nonconforming.
Okay.
On the site plan, that house is shown there, so you can get an idea about how close it is there. The garage is between the house and the property
Down
line.
here?
It shows you exactly where it is.
Oh, it's page 14.
Yeah.
That one, okay.
I think that one is it's a little hard to see because there's an extra line there, but this is I have the aerial up. If you look, this is the Ziegler lot, and then if you know where our the Ziegler water tank is, it's the lot directly south of that, and then you have a house lot. So as you go down West Freeway Drive, you're going to pass Ziegler, and it's the very next vacant lot. Now, what's deceiving is you're going to drive down the road and you're going to see this big empty lot, and then you're going to see the Ziegler water tank. That's still Ziegler. It's actually just south of the water tank. And then if you drove a little bit more south, you'll see that there are 2 houses, and there's also a house across the street. And then there's a very large vacant lot, and then you cross over the bridge.
Okay, so I know you had mentioned that, that the house was there and that you would put up some type of a fence or something.
Yeah, well, talking with your senior planner, Dean, he was suggesting a decorative fence between the buildings and then maybe some sort of landscaping along the property there to break that up, so that it just doesn't look like all wall fence all along there, but
Yep.
that certainly shouldn't be difficult to do.
So just to kind of clarify too, and it does sound like in this type of area, the businesses that you would have in there, there's not going to be a lot of traffic going in and out all day? Is it more of a, they're there to do their business and the car drives up and gets out, person works there all day and then leaves? Or could it be businesses where there's a lot of vehicles coming and going all day.
That's not the type of thing that we typically get for this. It's sort of like contractor warehouses. So you'd have, a small number of employees working in these buildings, but not a whole lot of end user type customers coming and going all the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, and I mean, some contractor shops, you could have a lot of contractors going back and forth and not necessarily like for retail, but
That's true.
just trying to get an idea of what kind of impact it's going to have on the neighbors around.
Hmm.
This is Bob, Planning Commission. This is a question for Greg. Related to the draft preliminary site plan, you show parking around the buildings. Does that mean you're going to put asphalt down as your primary road surface?
Yeah, that's the intent.
Yeah.
I assume that's required, I believe, but it doesn't make sense to not have it asphalt. Our grades are fairly flat around those buildings because you got a long building and then, the building's level and we got a long distance to get the drainage to work. So the grades are going to be fairly flat, and if you have gravel, it's just hard to get that drainage to work. The other thing then is, of course, you're going to have a lot dirtier water going to the stormwater ponds, so we expect that would all be asphalt.
Good, thank you.
This is Sue. I thought of one other question. So on the, would be the west side of the property where you're not, so like when you go back here, I think this is going to be developed, and then back here, will that be developed in the future?
That's all wetland.
That's all wetland, okay. And then Elizabeth, right on the other side of that, that's residential property that would border the back of that one on the west side?
Actually, that's north, I believe, isn't it? On our plans, our north is to the left, I believe.
Yes, you are correct. It does border a residential district. It is quite a lot of wetland, so I don't believe there will ever be anything developed behind there.
Okay, thank you.
This is Barb. John, I have a question. You said you have businesses like this in Michigan. How is the property managed there with CUPs and so forth? What do they do in Michigan?
A lot of these buildings were built out in rural areas in the townships of Michigan, and some of them were before my time. This is kind of like a family business that I've been doing with my dad. And I'm not exactly sure how they manage the CUPs there, or even if there was any. That's a good question. Offhand, I don't have that answer, but I think it's probably something worth looking into. A lot of them that have been done in the past are similar to this, where you have a lot of different tenants on a large parcel of land, different types of contractors. But as far as how those permits were administered, I couldn't tell you that right now.
Okay, thank you.
John, this is Ron.
Yeah.
Planning Commission. Are you going to have somebody on site there, kind of as the leader, or are you going to run this out of North Oaks? I mean, it's the management.
It's just going to depend on how this goes. We're going to have an administrative office. Maybe not in North Oaks, but someplace close by. Probably not on site, but close by for sure. Leasing and all of that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have questions or ideas?
This is Shelley on the council. I have a question for Mr. Sawyer. You've mentioned a couple of times that what we have proposed or what we've asked you about was not typical of what was being, these places were being rented for. And I was wondering, can you give us kind of a percentage of like the properties in Michigan of what people are using it for? Because light industrial can mean a lot of things.
Right. A couple of really good examples would be, again, like I said, the number one by a far margin would be contractor supply warehouses, such as plumbers or electricians, things of that nature. We've had some small repair, automotive repair, automotive painting, body shops, things of that nature. Another one would be like a moving and storage, where they're storing moving boxes in their moving vans. And then, you know, sometimes it might be a very small assembly operation, maybe assembling, I don't know, small widgets or whatever you can think of. And then once in a while, there'll be like maybe, you know, pet care or pet kennel, dog grooming, something like that on a small scale. That doesn't come up very often, but again, I'd say the large majority is these contractor warehouses or inside storage where people are warehousing some type of material. We've had, you know, Michigan Sugar is a real big sugar manufacturer. And when they ran out of storage for theirs, they've used some of our buildings to store their sugar temporarily inside. So generally warehousing is the big thing. If you look at, I don't know if I included the floor plan in this, I guess I didn't, but typically the way these buildings would be constructed is that you would have a small amount of office space in part of the building, maybe 400 square feet or so. The rest of it is open for the end user to configure as they choose. And typically they'll fill it up with shelving and store whatever they need to store there. Oh, there you go. Yeah, there it is. So what's being shown on the screen now, you can see we have a very large open space there. Down in that bottom right corner, there's a very small office for, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 workers, however many they need there. And we have a couple of overhead doors, one at the back, a couple on the sides. And the end user is free to, you know, park their vehicles inside, put up shelving and racks to store their materials and come and go as they need to. And I'd say that's easily 75 to 80% of what these buildings are used for.
If there's a dispute, this is Shelley again, if there's a dispute between two of the people that are leasing between the buildings, then are you the arbitrator for that?
That is correct. Thankfully, that does not come up hardly at all.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess this indicates how important that CUP issue is, because that sounds like a lot of different kinds of businesses rather than just like, say, light assembly for everybody. So,
correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? So this is not a voting issue. This is just a get to know you issue. So what do we suggest for the next steps? Continue working with our senior planner and city staff?
So yes, the applicant would continue to work with our city planner, associate planner. I would defer to the applicant as to whether you have any additional questions for the Planning Commission and Council that you would like to hear answered. Otherwise,
I have one other question. Do you currently own the land, or are you in the process of purchasing it?
We own it. We purchased it, I'd have to think back. I think it was late last year we purchased it.
Okay, thanks.
This is Greg. I had a question, like, it's sounding like it probably would be best to do a PUD along with CUP, but I'm assuming that maybe the city would be getting back to us before we should make an application, is kind of what we're talking about. So I don't know if you would have like a working group again to go through that. Anyway, just wondering if you can envision how long it might be before we would have input so we'd know when to move forward on completing this. Hard to answer.
Our city staff group meets once a month. And so we generally discuss these things at the city staff meeting. And they're more technical issues like this, and, what's the best tool to use for vehicle for this particular development. And as Dean brought up, we don't have interim uses listed in this district any longer. So we'll have to figure out what is the best approach. But I think, Dean, do you think in this particular case that it would be a simple conference call between all of us? And in order to get an answer pretty quickly back to them?
Was that a question to me, Elizabeth? This is Dean.
The question is to what type of application that they would apply for, whether in fact we all land on a plan unit development with a CUP, and then individual permits for the individual businesses, or what the best format for him to actually apply for a permit.
I do think that the staff should provide that direction. So at our next meeting, whether it's in person or virtual, I think we need to have a comfort level ourselves as to the specific nature of an application. I think it definitely should be a planned unit development, which requires the conditional use procedure. The question remains, are there going to be 10 conditional use permits, or if you have a single owner, manager of property, is it a single conditional use permit on each building that has to be updated anytime there's, not anytime, but many times if there's a change in use? And I suspect that's the case, but I think we all have to agree to that before we can provide direction to the applicant.
Dean, this,
What is your time frame that you were looking for an answer?
I know when we started on this, John was hoping to start construction later this year, but knowing how things are going here, it seems like that might be unlikely. But John, maybe you could answer if your time frame has changed or not. We've been, we thought we were actually going to apply for a CUP. We were within a week or two of having everything ready, and then we found out, we need to come to this meeting, and then we got our dates mixed up, so we missed the last meeting. Now here we are again, and now we're still talking about not knowing. But John, maybe you could answer that. I don't know, with interest rates going up, maybe steel prices will come down, and it might be an advantage to wait a little bit, or have you already ordered steel?
Well, yeah, I'm glad we're getting to this part of the discussion. That point that you just made, Greg, about inflation and the steel prices, I'm watching that very closely. For these types of buildings, the lead time to get steel delivered is in excess of 6 months. And then to schedule a construction crew is another large lead time. So, we're always thinking pretty far out as far as when construction can start. But it would be nice to have some direction as to like when we can actually order the steel, because we can't do anything until we have the steel on site, and the lead time on that right now is 6 months. But with the way the economy is going, that might change. So, there's a little bit of uncertainty right now, and like I said, it takes a while to get these things going after there's approvals. But the sooner we can get some direction, we can make an order on the steel, and then maybe work out more details in the 6 or 8 months that we're waiting for the steel to be delivered. So there's all kinds of little moving parts that we have to consider.
Well, go ahead.
We'll schedule a we'll schedule a conference call and we'll get back to you by the end of next week.
Okay, super.
Well, that'd be great.
Um, Oh, on the PUD process, is there several meetings? Is it like there's first a preliminary PUD, we go planning commission council, and then come back for a final PUD, or what's the actual process on that?
In this particular case, you will have 2 planning commission meetings, so you'll have a public hearing, and then 2 weeks later, you'll have discussion. The planning commission has 2 meetings a month, so it's pretty quick that you get through the planning commission, and then you will go to council after the second planning commission meeting. So there's 3 meetings total that you will go through, but prior to that, it's submitting your application, making sure it's complete, and then long enough for in between is long enough for staff members to draft a report, and then also get the legal notices out that are required. Generally, it's a 60-day process. We're mostly leaning towards the 60 days, so it does take the full 60 days to get through the process. There are times when it bleeds over a little bit by a few days, but for the most part, we've been able to get people through the process.
Assuming we don't run into too many obstacles, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
One other question I have. As far as these building sizes, we're, fitting in what seems to fit fairly well on this site, but perhaps there's a chance that there's a user that comes in that wants 2 buildings and he'd just as soon have one bigger building. That, I assume, would require us to go back through the PUD process and change and have the new site plan?
Unfortunately, when you change the site plan, it's the site plan that they approve in the PUD process, and if you change it, you will have to come for an amendment. I will say an amendment is a little bit easier than from the ground up, so we try to make that a little quicker process where you go before the planning commission once, and then you go before the council once.
Okay, thank you.
This is Bob. One last question. This is for Dean. Through a PUD with individual CU permit concept, could we not allow for the CU permit to be contingent upon the length of the lease? So if it was a 3 to 5 year lease that was signed and there was turnover at the end of that period, then the CU would come back to us for review of the new lease owner with the new contract. So instead of going with the land, it goes with the lease. And so my thought is that still works, and I think it addresses the mayor's idea about an interim use. Because if your contracts are only 3 to 5 years, then that really is kind of an interim use for that length of time. And then also, I'm assuming that 3 to 5 year contract will have a right of first refusal to renew it for an additional 3 to 5 years. So once again, it would roll over and continue on with that same lease owner. So those are my thoughts.
I don't know what John's thoughts are, but one thought that occurred is that I suppose we have a 45 to 60-day process to get through a CUP. And so if we, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You got to get your user in place, sign them to a contract without knowing whether you're going to get the CUP or not. And then, sometimes people, if there's a rental space, they would like to move in fairly quickly.
It's like a land option agreement, only with a lease.
Yeah. Anyway, it just seems like it just really ties the hands if you got somebody that wants to get something. They know there's a rental property available, and they got another one that they can rent to. All of a sudden, if we got to wait 60 days before we can have something for them.
Yeah, once again, our intent is not to slow you down,
Right.
to help you through the process so we can get you there as fast as possible.
Yeah. Anyway, just trying to make sure I understand.
But that'll be a good part of the discussion with the staff, because you're perfectly correct. And also the city wants to maintain a degree of assurance that what you say and what your customers say is what happens. So, that's gonna be a long call. Anyway, all right, so
Okay.
we've got the idea. Thank you for coming in. Thank everybody for all the questions, a lot of good questions, and on we go.
We appreciate your time and input. Very valuable.
Yeah, yeah, thank you very much for all your questions and comments and listening to us here.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
And we hope to be back in front of you fairly soon.
Go.
Thank you again.
Yep.
Thank
Thank you all. All right, let's move on to number 7. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, number 7, residential zone business moratorium study questions, 1 to 3, pages 26, and additional pages A1 through A10.
Excuse me, I have a point of order. I just have a question. Since I expect this will be a pretty long discussion, do we want to do our public open forum first? So if anybody has any comments, they don't have to sit through 2 hours of us hashing through residential zone business stuff.
I have no problem. Anyone want to speak at public open forum? Hearing none. Cross off number 8. Back to number 7. So who wants to take the lead on this, Jessica? Since you are the one who did all the homework for us.
Yep. I was planning on taking the lead on this one. Just a random point. I can't see the camera into the chambers. I don't know if that's intentional or I just was thinking if it'd be nice to be able to see everybody in there.
So, Mr. Camera Operator, are you able to get the camera back in the city council chamber?
If not, we don't have to. I just wanted to give it a shot.
Yeah, just,
You asked her on you have the Zoom up on your computer?
yep.
So hit video and on the Zoom screen at the bottom left. And then right there should be an X through it. So if you click it, then it'll.
Okay, we're good.
There we go.
So,
Thank you.
Just, in addition, Jessica's going to go through 3 documents, so I just want to make sure everyone has the documents. So on the very back page of your agenda packet, there's a memo and that has questions. So just keep it upside down and up because we're going to use that. Then you have another one that has a chart on it, so you'll be using that one in addition. And then you have a third, which is actually a memo, and you'll be also using that. So I just want to make sure you have all 3 sets of materials that she'll be working with.
Got it.
Okay, great. So we'll start with, in the agenda packet, the memo that I had sent out with the 3 questions and the schedule of meetings going forward. So this is what I'm calling meeting 1, even though we've already had a couple meetings. This will be meeting 1 of our residential zone business moratorium discussions. You'll see I have a list of the next few meetings finishing in November, which will leave us a little bit of time, hopefully, to get everything done. In terms of the subject matter for the meetings, I've tried to pair like things with like things. So you see storage, screening paired together on one meeting, and then you see things like traffic and employees on another meeting. So hopefully that will help keep us on subject, on task for those meetings, and we can get through all of the questions that might arise relating to one or the other subject matter. I left ordinance drafting for the end. I left 2 meetings for that, so hopefully that's enough time. Each meeting that we have, I will put together a table like the one that you have tonight with the control measures that we're discussing at that time. So For example, on the meeting with storage and screening, you'll have a similar table, but instead of having the current columns on there, you'll have the columns for storage and screening and the other similar control measures that we'd like to go through at that meeting. So that's just kind of big picture, where we're going, where we're headed. And I think that we should just jump right into the questions that we have for this evening. There are 3 questions. So now I'm moving to the memo that has a date of June 14th in the additions. So tonight I wanted to start with the broad overarching questions of how do we want to define our residential zone business or home occupation in the residential district? What do we want to call it? How do we want to categorize things so that going forward, when we look at specific control measures, we can, consider if that fits into different categories of home occupation or residential zone business. So we get the broad overarching questions out of the way here today. There will be room to go back and change things. Nothing is set in stone. As we go through and make some changes, I anticipate there being a few things that come up that will affect the definitions that we talk about this evening. So all in the spirit of keeping the train moving forward, with the idea that we've got 6 months to finish this, trying to keep moving forward as best we can. So we'll use the memo, the June 14th memo, as a jumping point for discussion tonight. I have recommendations from city staff on there that we can talk about as a starting point. I'll be asking people to contribute on each question, do my best to get feedback from everybody. Feel free, if you don't have anything to add, to just say, I don't have anything to add. I'm just listening to see what others have to say. So no pressure to contribute if you don't have anything to add. I also anticipate having a vote at the end to get a consensus. Again, we have a big group of people. So it'll be, I think, easiest to just, once discussion is concluding, have a final vote to see where things stand. Going forward, these meetings will be held at the Planning Commission level, and a commissioner will give a report to the council at the following meeting. But tonight, we've got the whole group here. So we will be doing that voting at the end of each question. Any questions or feedback on that before we jump into our first question on the memo?
Jessica, this is Janet. I didn't understand what you just said. After this will be done at the Planning Commission level? It's not going to continue to be a joint meeting? Is that what you mean?
That was not correct. The plan was to have discussion at the Planning Commission level and have commissioners report back to the council after every meeting, similar to how the billboard ordinance was done.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but I'd love to hear what other people think. I think this is such a big topic, and it certainly is one of the top priorities for this council. So I had envisioned it as being a joint process all the way through, but I'm curious what others think.
This is, should I go first?
Won't the planning commission report go to the city or to the council for approval or adjustment or?
Yes, I understand that. I'm just saying that there's a lot to be considered here. So I feel like that's dumping a lot on the planning commission. Then they come back and we don't like it. Then it goes back to the planning commission. It's going to blow this timeline out of the water. And I think many of us on the council have been thinking about this, looking at other cities that have, want to be part of the process. But that's my opinion. So I'm happy to defer to what the group thinks.
Sue?
Oh, this is Sue. I guess I just assumed we were going to be doing it in joint meetings because that's how we started. I would not be opposed to having it done the other way, but I kind of agree with Janet that it would be more going back and forth. So if that's, but also if how often do we have joint meetings? If it's less than, if that would prolong it, then I would not want to do that.
I think we're trying to not add more meetings to the calendar. We're trying to fit things in where they can. Also, having a large group makes meetings longer just inherently, having 9 people to discuss and hear from. So I think that either way, our timeline might get blown up. But, having discussion at the planning commission level is how we did the billboard ordinance and how I thought these discussions were supposed to happen in general anyway. But I think we're open. I don't know, Elizabeth, I think we had talked about doing it at this way. I don't know if you have anything to add.
I think, in this case, if the whole group wants to do it together, we don't have an issue with it. We just want to make sure everyone is on the same page, and if that's the direction you want to take, we'll make sure that we're utilizing the meetings. I think that if we're going to do it that way, I think we might have a meeting where you might have one hearing and one discussion, and then you might have a discussion, because I don't know that we have enough meetings to have a joint meeting and maybe not have a component of a planning commission meeting, depending on how applications continue.
I guess this is Rob. Me personally, I would trust that the planning commission could come up with a good recommendation to bring to the council, and if us as the council need to add any additions or tweaks to it, I know some have some refinements already, but I'd be good with the planning commission taking hold of it and giving a recommendation to the council.
How does the planning commission feel about it?
It's kind of nice to know where your thoughts are.
And that's why I bring this up, because that's what I've heard as a frustration from several planning commissioners, is that they get assigned something, it's a hybrid of policy and procedure, they do the best job they can, it comes to us and we completely turn it upside down. And so that was sort of where I was coming from, but again, I'm happy to go with whatever the majority wants. I really think the planning commission should opine on what they want to, though.
A lot of times, though, you guys are at our planning commission meetings. We usually have 3 to 4 council members there.
We don't talk.
But they don't.
We can't add input.
Comments.
Well, you can open a door up, can't you, for discussion? Elizabeth?
I think it's just redundant to have the planning commission and then have to go to the council and then back to the planning commission. Tonight would have been a planning commission. So, it fits in. It's nice to have everybody present, because then it gets discussed one time, rather than 3 times. It just seems redundant to me.
I think Elizabeth brought up a good point one time. 10 or 20 eyes looking at something is better than 5. Or 10, because 10 of us look at it, then all of a sudden 10 more look at it and they see something else and they bring it back to us.
The whole point is, though, that the council usually is present at the planning commission. We're muzzled, and I think sometimes that's a good idea. But you've been very open to letting us make comment. You've actually asked for our opinion a couple of times, and and I think maybe in the past I might have been reticent to jump in, but in this particular case, maybe if you would allow us to jump in if we just feel like it's really going off the rails and we're going to have to bring it back to you or something like that. But otherwise, we really are there anyway. But it would. I'm always kind of humbled by the fact that I think that the planning commission comes up with better questions than I do, and so I kind of appreciate. That's why I go to the planning commission, is because they do a good job. So I would rather see us let the planning commission take it, but then if, like I said, if we feel like, oh my goodness, I think it's off the rails and I'd like to see them go in a different direction or whatever, that we'd be able to say that. But to go around the table and ask, 9 people their opinion, we've seen what that does with some of the other things we've done, and it's bogged it down for months, and then we don't get anywhere.
Chris?
I think we're
what's your
kind of
opinion?
aiming for that. Last night, we talked about being autocratic versus, the democracy here, and that, we've got, if we want to get some of this stuff done by the end of the year, and we've got 3 moratoriums going, maybe we need to, be a little more autocratic.
Chris?
This is Chris. I think when it comes to policy on some of these, it's good to have your input as we're talking about it. I think the billboard got stretched way long because we were going back and forth, and maybe part of that is there wasn't as much organization. I mean, Jessica has kind of laid out a schedule, which is good, and if we can stick to that, that's helpful, but we all know that never works. I'm finding more and more the Planning Commission can do their part, and we can come up with recommendations, but we have been probably more lately not always gone the right way. And the policy part of it is really where it comes into. And the more we can streamline this with maybe not going back and forth and that, it might work better. So I don't care either way. I just want to streamline it, and I want to know. I can put my input in, but really that's all it is. It comes down to what the council is going to make as policy, and having that direction as we go through this, I think is beneficial.
Okay, Elizabeth, the question really becomes timing.
Yes.
So, are we able to have the joint meetings when there is not a lot of joint meeting to work on this, when there is not a full agenda for the Planning Commission, without setting it back a month or so?
And I think that's the trick here, and I think that there's going to have to be some flexibility in that. So I think that when we're able to have a joint meeting, if that's the direction you go, we can certainly do that. But I think we need to have meetings, as Jessica defined, once a month. Otherwise, it doesn't, you know what I mean, it doesn't work. And there might be a month where we have applications. Like in July, we have applications. So you're going to have a component of discussion. So, because we can't just skip a month.
Right.
We can't do that. And so that was my question to all of, you know what I mean, all of you. If you feel that there's, because we're going to have to continue with the applications, there's got to be a component of discussion of moratorium at each one of these meetings. Whether it's this moratorium or the Lake Drive moratorium, there's got to be components of discussion at each one of them. And if you're thinking every meeting is going to be a joint meeting, then we'd have to, reschedule or repost them. Because again, we're trying to run 3 moratoriums here. Frank's going to take one, Bill's group is going to take one, Jessica and I have, have this, and we're trying to run them through the existing meetings. So if you're thinking the format is going to be joint, then we're going to have a lot of joint meetings.
Does it make any sense to do a combination of both? So not every single meeting is a joint meeting, but at the next Planning Commission, Jessica has some pages for everybody to go through. Planning Commission does it. Perhaps the next one is a joint meeting, so everybody can come back together, revisit everything that was done, and move forward. Is that sensible or not?
Again, it's really the format that you want to choose. We were thinking that the other moratoriums were going to run to the Planning Commission and then to the council. And again, that's the format that we used before. But if that's not what you're thinking, again, we have to rethink all of the meetings, because you're not going to have enough meetings to have an exclusive joint meeting without any Planning Commission applications. There just isn't enough time for that. So if it's going to truly be a joint meeting, then we might as well just reschedule all of them, and they're all joint meetings. We can't run 3 moratoriums in the same night. We're
Yep.
going to be doing different components of it because different people are working on them, because we only have 6 months. In 6 months' time, that's only,
12 meetings.
you know what I mean, yeah, 12 meetings, and so and again, we all are not going to have the same information, because there are 2 weeks' time in between meetings is not enough time to maybe get information together. So Jessica might be on the first meeting, you know what I mean, and then Frank might be in the next meeting. So there's going to be components of different moratoriums and different discussions as we move along. So I realize this one you might want to do jointly, but maybe the others you don't do jointly. And I'm not saying which way to do it, but again, we're trying to schedule other people with these meetings.
Yeah. Okay, then if we left it with the planning commission, and usually all of us board members are at the meeting,
Mhm.
how do we put our input in so that's legal on the record and
Sure.
sensible?
That's where Ron has all the power. So Ron is the chair, and Ron holds the gavel at the meeting. And so it is up to him to recognize people as far as input. And we can certainly say, you know, just like I have a, you know, city administrator's report, we can add, you know, city council's input, or Ron can just simply recognize them during that discussion and saying, you know, do you have things to add? You know, you've heard our discussion, you know, are we going in the right direction? Or raising your hand and saying, you know, I think you're kind of going a little far this way, or whatever comments that you have, but it's really up to the chair to recognize the audience.
Mr. Chair, will you recognize us?
I always have.
So I have another suggestion. You know, Jessica, it's really helpful to have these questions. They really, I think, allow us to do kind of our soul searching ahead of the meeting. And so, believe me, I have the utmost confidence in our planning commission. So my comment has nothing to do with feeling like they're not capable of taking this on. But I'm wondering whether or not another way to help address the problem or the situation that I'm seeing is, in your question, maybe you ask the council to, you know, provide their input on the policy aspect of whatever is going to be discussed. That way you guys would have that, and that would be guiding for you as you work through more of the logistics and that kind of stuff. Because I think that's generally where it's hard. Like, you're trying to come up with the logistics and you don't really know what the vision of the council is in that way. And I think if there's a way to articulate that, then I don't have a problem with having, you know, but that's the problem I was trying to solve, is without having that stated in some way or communicated in some way, then the planning commission is kind of flying blind on some of these things. And then that feels really inefficient and not fair to them. I wouldn't want to do all that work and then have the council go, oh, no, that's not what we were thinking.
So you're suggesting continuing with these types of questions ahead of time?
Yes, I'm suggesting that, but also when I look at the, you know, the way that you've got this parsed out, which is really, I think, really, you know, helpful. And the last two are about the ordinances. That's really just taking all the work that we did in the prior 3 or 4 meetings and putting it into ordinance language. You know, I don't think we have to be in a joint meeting to do that. I think that when you look at things like storage, screening, sights and sounds, I mean, if you have a policy question that can kind of summarize, like, what's the overarching vision of the council on this? You know, is it to make it be invisible to your neighbors? Is it to make it not be a nuisance to your neighbors, but it doesn't have to be invisible? And what does invisible mean? I mean, those are the kinds of policy things that I think we don't all agree on. And then so to ask the planning commission to kind of come up with
what the rules should be or the controls should be, then I feel like that's really hard. So I don't know, Jessica, do you think, I mean, when you come up with the questions, if they get sent to all of us, but in particular, pull out what the policy question is in these sort of topical meetings, then maybe it doesn't have to be a joint meeting. We can weigh in on the policy side of it so that the Planning Commission has that guidance. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just a suggestion to try to get away from Elizabeth's concern about the scheduling of joint meetings.
Yeah, I think I can do that. It is going to involve a little bit more planning ahead of time on my part, right? Because we want the packets done by the Friday beforehand. I would have to circulate the questions to the council and give you all a few days to think about it at least and provide your input again. We'd have to make sure that everyone gets their input to us by the Friday before the meeting. So, and this is all with, a month or 3 weeks between meetings. And I have other things to do. So yes, I think we can do that if we want to stick with the Planning Commission meetings for the bulk of the work on this.
Either that or
We'll
pick the ones that you feel like that's too hard to do and have those be joint, and then don't have the other ones be joint.
I didn't hear you, Janet.
I said either what we're suggesting about pulling out what the policy question is, or look at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more meetings, right? So are the first two, do we feel like those could be difficult because we're kind of on different places as a council in terms of the policy on this? I mean, I use the example about the visual, does a residential zone business, should it be invisible to their neighbors, or should it just not create a nuisance to their neighbors? That's a policy question. You would go through all of these other things very differently if the answer was it truly has to be invisible versus no, we just don't want it to be a nuisance, right? And that's where I'm afraid if we don't have the joint meetings, the Planning Commission can go down one route, and then they come to us and it's like, well, no, we're thinking something completely different. So if we can, if the policy question is something like the invisibility question, and we start off with that before we come to the meeting, we start off with that, then the Planning Commission takes the lead. I mean, I keep I'm looking around with people looking like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. So I have lived through this so many times. And I see Chris nodding her head. So I think maybe you describe it, because I'm not doing a very good job. I'm seeing puzzled looks.
You are doing a good job, but I think it just comes down to, does it make sense to pull out the topics that the policy really is the big part of it? And it's all policy.
I was just going to say.
It's all policy, I get that, but.
The problem is it's all policy,
Yes.
That's the whole reason why we're here. And the whole point of having the Planning Commission is the Planning Commission does the work, and then you make a recommendation of policy to the council members. But if the policy decision is predetermined, then there really isn't any more research to do. So it's kind of like you can't say, here's a conclusion, find a way to get to that conclusion is basically what I'm hearing, because that's the guidance it would be. It wouldn't be like, look at the full umbrella, just look at this, you know what I mean, just look at this point. So again, policy is difficult, and so I think in this case, if that's the vein, then I think you have no choice but to do it jointly, because there really isn't a way to pick out half the questions and not do the whole thing. It doesn't make sense.
Well, and the reason I bring that up is because generally the Planning Commission isn't creating policy. They're taking established policy and applying the rules to whatever the application is. So to ask them to read our minds about what the policy should be, I think that's where we've run into problems before, and where things have become protracted and volleyed back and forth between the two bodies. So that's the only thing I'm trying to solve. And there may be other ways. That's just some suggestions. And being sympathetic to the timing and the staff workload, et cetera.
Well, could we
Bob, you
do,
haven't mentioned anything. What do you think?
I think the planning commission is here to lighten the load and to do the work. And I think we make recommendations based on how we see the policy with as much information as we have at the time, which includes feedback from city council members, city staff, planners. I mean, I think that we're here to do the work to lighten your load, to help you make good decisions, recognizing that we did the work for you.
I wanted to ask, and thanks, Bob, I appreciate that. My question is, Dean will be involved, correct, in all of the discussions? So he would be, if we went the direction of just the planning commission having the meeting and then bringing it to the council, Dean would be involved in that, helping to guide the planning commission like he normally does on other topics? Is that correct?
Dean is going to be part of all, all the meetings. I think depending on, he'll have a part on each moratorium, you know what I mean, in the discussion, he'll be at every meeting. I don't think he's going to do all 3 moratoriums. I think we were divvying up the work in big picture. But yes, he'll be a resource for you, along with Bill's group, along with staff members. So you'll have lots of input.
all right. What about this suggestion? Let's do the next meeting with the council in the audience, being recognized for our wisdom and expertise by the chair, with Dean throwing in his expertise and wisdom, and see what happens. And revisit it. I mean,
But also get the questions in advance maybe and try to get some feedback,
if possible.
if possible.
Jessica, if you can, everything we have in advance, I think would be helpful for everybody. You know, make us,
Yeah,
give us our list and make us do our work. Help us do our work.
so if we do that at the next planning commission meeting, then would that be, I'm looking at a calendar here, July,
It's July 20th.
okay. Okay. We have a little bit more time with the holiday then, I guess.
Yes. But what it will mean though, you might not just be working on this moratorium, you might be working on another one too. So that's what I'm saying, during the same meetings, we're going to be moving forward with the other moratoriums too. So we're not doing one moratorium and then
Get it?
another, but you know what I mean? So just understand that the moratoriums are running concurrently with the discussions. Otherwise, we won't finish in time.
So July 20th will be a joint meeting, and instead of meeting at 6:30, we'll be meeting at 6? Is that?
My understanding was that it was going to be just a planning commission meeting. I don't know, when Jesse said that the council would be in the audience. That's what I,
And you know what I mean? Again, there always has to be a component of the planning commission meeting because I'm also putting in applications. You know what I mean? There isn't a choice. You know what I mean? Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to process the applications.
so technically it would be a planning commission meeting with the council in the audience, Ron recognizing a time for the council to give input, and the council will also be providing their policy feedback on the questions before the meeting. So it's like a hybrid, but technically it's a planning commission meeting.
Yeah, I don't care what you call it. I just want to get it moving forward and get it accomplished. So what was the date of that again?
July 20th.
July 20th.
Is the next planning commission meeting.
Wednesday, July 20th.
And would that be a 6:30 start then?
Yes.
If it's a planning commission, okay. Okay, if we don't have, anybody else have anything else on that topic?
All right.
Okay. All right, we're gonna jump right into question 1. So First question, I'm just going to read it. How should the city define businesses in the residential district? Should the name be changed from residential zone business and home occupation? I think throughout this conversation, we are going to have to talk about the home occupation aspect of our ordinances, although the focus really is the residential zone business part of it. In the table that you have, there is a column that I put in what cities are using to define their home occupations or their purpose statements from their ordinances. If it's blank, they don't have one. That's just a good reference for you as we're going through this. The first thing I want to talk about is the name residential zone business. I think that everybody saw when they were doing research, the term home occupation is pretty common throughout. And I personally didn't see any calling any type of home occupation or whatever a residential zone business. I never saw that term residential zone business again. So my recommendation is to call it all home occupation and have two types of home occupation. One would be a general home occupation, which essentially fits the current definition of a home occupation in our ordinance. The second would be a special home occupation, which would take the place of the name residential zone business, and a special home occupation would be regulated through an interim use permit. So let's just stop there before we get into definitions. Any thoughts about the names, terminology?
Yes, I remember all the discussion on that we've had. I'm in favor of getting rid of residential zone business and calling them general home occupation and special home occupation, just so that we're in sync with the rest of the world. Does anyone have a different opinion than that?
This is Janet. I have a little tweak to it. I agree, get rid of residential zone business. I couldn't find any reference in any other city's ordinance using that terminology either. But what I really liked is the way that Oak Grove does it, because I printed that out. So Oak Grove says home occupation, no interim use permit, home occupation, interim use permit. It is so clear. Nobody has to look and figure out what special means or extended means or anything like that. It's just really clear. If you fit under a home occupation, no interim use permit, there isn't you're a permitted use, right? And if there is one, then you get one. And we don't have to then define what special and extended and all those other words mean. And I think about that one example, Elizabeth, that you told us about a while back, where, you know, they're running a business out of their home. The person's a realtor. You said, or whoever talked to him said, no, it's a residential zone business. You need an IUP. And she's like, I looked at your ordinance. It's a home occupation. No, I don't need that. I fit that definition. So I just think let's make it as clear as we can. It's everything's a home occupation. One requires an IUP, one does not.
Okay. So you would call them,
The way Oak Grove defines it is home occupation, no interim use permit, a home occupation, interim use permit required.
So then in every instance where we talk about that, so there will be a section for the home occupation interim use permit required. We would just say home occupation and then in parentheses afterwards, write interim use permit required.
Yeah, or IUP in parentheses with IUP. I'm just trying to minimize confusion for whoever might be looking at this and trying to decide what they need to do. Words like special and extended, when I didn't know what that meant. I really liked it when I saw cities' ordinances that made it really clear. Home occupation, conditional use, home occupation, IUP. I mean, you didn't need to know anything more than that. You need a permit.
okay, anybody, any discussion on that? That does clarify. It gets right to the point. Either none, no IUP, or IUP. Chris, what do you think?
I think simplifying it is the best way to go. I know after I was reading different ones, ours seemed very confusing with being in two different locations. So I think the more we can simplify it, the better off we are. So I'm in favor of that.
Shelley, you go with that?
Fine.
Sue?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Got that, Jessica?
Yeah, so we're going with, they're both called home occupation, but one will have in parentheses, no permit required, and the other will have in parentheses, IUP or interim use permit required.
Correct.
Okay. The second part of this question is definitions. I remember getting feedback from many of you that our ordinance doesn't have really a definition of what a residential zone business is. We do have a definition of home occupation. However, I thought it would be good to kind of start fresh with both of these. So in the June 14th memo, I have recommendation for definitions, and I have a general home occupation. I'm just going to use that terminology for now since it is in the memo, and special home occupation. I also included a purpose statement for the special home occupation. You'll notice, let's talk about the general home occupation, where there will be no permit required. There is one part of that definition at the very end that says performed within a dwelling unit with minimal storage in an accessory structure. I think that with minimal storage in an accessory structure is what is currently allowed in city ordinances. I think that aspect is on the table up for debate when we get to the storage control measure meeting. Some cities allow storage in an accessory building for a home occupation without a permit. Some cities don't. So my recommendation is just to leave that in the definition portion for now and come back to it after we make a further decision on storage at a later meeting. I'm guessing, I'm thinking that I'll just have you guys take a second and read that definition and let me know, is there anything that we should add, anything we should take away? This is something that I could get feedback on now and bring back to the next meeting for a final look over. And of course, when we draft the ordinance itself, we'll get another look over on it. But any thoughts, comments, what should be added or taken away just on the general home occupation with no permit?
I have a question, Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
The property owner, does this mean a renter?
So, right, the way it's written is property owner and or occupant. So it leaves the possibility open for a renter to have a home occupation. Many cities will have a portion of their code saying something like written permission is required from the property owner for a tenant to run a home occupation. Things like that, that's calling back to the property owner to give the okay on a tenant to run a home occupation. So as it's written right now, it gives the option for the property owner or a occupant tenant renter person to run the home occupation.
No, I guess I wonder, do we want that? I mean, I'm going to throw another wrench into it. So, and Dean's there, I hope he's listening. So we got this apartment building that may come in. Those apartment buildings fall within this in a PUD? Or how does that?
So the apartment building will be located not in the rural residential district. At the way that our code stands right now, special home occupations or residential zone businesses can only be operated in the rural residential district. So where a permit is required, a type of business where a permit is required would not be allowed in the apartment building. However, there's no restriction on zoning for a no permit required home occupation. So this would allow a member of the renter in the apartment building to have a home occupation unless we find other ways through other control measures to not allow that. One way to do that would be to say that home occupations without a permit are only allowed in the rural residential district. Or it has to be a property owner.
Well, that would define that and simplify it, that it's only in the residential district, and you don't have to be concerned about the apartment, period.
But I think there are some duplexes in our residential.
I can't hear you.
I said, I think there are some duplexes or rental property in our rural residential, so you still may end up with the tenant situation.
Yeah, but my point is, his question was about the apartment. If it's only in rural residential, the apartment's off the table. So that's the question.
Right.
And the answer is, it's only rural residential, period. All right? Everybody agree on that?
And that is the way it's today. So in the commercial industrial district, in any of the commercial areas, you are not allowed to have a residential zone business.
Got that, everybody?
But we're talking about the home occupation now, right?
Right. Right.
Which
The
is
home
only allowed
occupation,
in the
there's no
rural
limit on zoning district for home occupation.
Currently, that doesn't exist that way for home occupation.
It does not for home occupation. But a home occupation is within the home. I don't know how you would regulate it because there's no permit required.
So again, I was looking at Oak Grove. I use Oak Grove a lot because my understanding is they redid all of their ordinances because they were having the same problem we had. And so I like a lot of their language. Their language says it's conducted only by the property owner and only in the private dwelling, nothing else, not in the garage, not in the pole barn. So that's pretty straightforward to me for the no permit required home occupation.
So I think the question on the table that everyone should be thinking about right now is whether you all want to allow a tenant, anybody who is not a property owner, but is only an occupant of the building, of the dwelling, to operate a home occupation without a permit. I think that we should save the discussion for accessory buildings and garages for another meeting. I think the question here is, do we want to allow a renter or other occupant of the building who is not the property owner to conduct a home occupation without a permit?
This is Barb. When you're talking about an apartment building, the owner of the apartment building.
Okay, Barb, the apartment is off the table because it's not in the residential district. So
okay.
we don't have to think about it or anything.
Oh, I thought we
Well,
just said
actually,
that.
no, Jesse, I just want to clarify that right now, as our code stands, a home occupation without a permit can go in any district.
Right.
In an apartment building, the owner of the building has their own policy about whether or not they will allow any kind of business in their building. And that's totally up to them because it's their property.
But let's simplify it for the city's sake and say it's for the owner of the home only, no renter.
Jesse, I agree with you, but I'm remembering something that Bill said.
Yeah.
I thought there was a
That
legal
that
thing
said we
here.
couldn't legally do that. Do you
Yeah,
remember
I
that?
remember that.
I mean, I think we need to pose this to the lawyer because I think it came up at some other point and he said you could not prohibit
Yeah, I
a
think
tenant from
an
doing that.
IUP that came in and there was something there that we could not
I
say
mean,
no
I would
to a
rather do
renter.
it your way, but I think we need to get some advice on the legality of it.
I think I think he quoted some case law that said something about equality, that you had to, if it was allowed in the district, somehow it discriminated. It was some sort of discrimination, and so you had to treat a renter with the same rights as a property owner. And I'm not exactly sure how he said it, but it was
Nope,
way
I
more
remember
elegant than
that.
that.
So we'll save the renter question for Bill. Now the terminology in here is and or occupant. So for example, my dad owns the property. I want to run a home occupation. I'm an occupant of that building. Should I be allowed to run a home occupation?
This is Bob. Absolutely. You should be able to do that. Particularly when the kids are staying home a lot longer than they used to, up to 26 years old for insurance purposes. I think you have to allow non-property owners and or tenants to run their home businesses. Now, whether it's an interim use or not, that'll be determined by the type of business it is.
I think for now we should leave the terminology and or occupant in there until we hear any strong arguments against that, or we get legal advice to take it out.
And also, please ask the attorney if it is strictly limited to the, if it's not allowed in the commercial district,
Zoning district, yeah.
that just takes all of that question off the table. So you don't have them having a sweatshop
Right.
inside of their apartment in the freeway corridor in our lovely high-end apartments. So are we allowed to do that?
And I think he would say, just, food for thought. I think he said if you listed in your permitted uses, I think if you literally put in home occupation, I think that's how you would regulate it. Because in that zoning district, you would look under the permitted uses and it would say home occupation. And then under the interim use permit, if that's the vehicle that we use for home occupation with interim use permit, then you would list it, you know what I mean, under that section, and then all the requirements. And if it's not in the other district, then it's not permitted.
Right. So I'm hearing from you all that there is interest in making a change to not, I mean, previously we really only had the rural residential districts, right? But now we have these mixed use districts that have some residential components to it. I think I'm hearing that the intention would be to limit home occupations without a permit to the rural residential districts.
Correct.
So Jesse, that would say someone in Priner's Preserve could not do it.
Correct.
Correct. And we're okay with that? I mean,
Yes,
those are standalone homes that they own.
Same now with St. Clair.
Yeah.
But we're trying to cut back on the extra work and the extra problems
Yeah.
and the extra nuisances.
But these would be, these are the ones without the IUPs. So this is like, the insurance guy running his insurance business out of his basement office. They don't.
But he's in the rural residential.
Could be in Priner's Preserve, could be in the St. Clair.
But why ask for more trouble? We're trying to reduce the problems. So if you're going to throw everybody in the apartment, can have a meth lab in there, and all the old
No,
ladies.
they need an IUP for that.
I mean, make it simple. Why add more problems?
Because I think that that's being too restrictive. They're not really creating a problem for anybody, and it's their property. And I think, to Bob's point, I mean, I think that's the balance we have to try to maintain, right?
I think we have a good balance right now. This was to help the old guys out in the rural residential so their wife could make jam and candles. Why expand it?
Well, I think, this is Sue, I think, I agree that I think that would be too restrictive. And, in the world of yesterday, it might have been okay, but now we're going to have apartments, we're going to have different types of residents. And I thought the purpose was to have more controls over how it affects your neighbors and not who is actually doing it. I mean, if somebody's doing something in a business that's not affecting anybody else, I don't really care if they own the house or are renting or are a brother or sister or daughter or whatever of the owner. I mean, isn't that the purpose, that we're trying to control it so they don't affect their neighbors and it's not ugliness and noise and traffic and all that kind of stuff?
We will get to those questions too. It's just this is a part of the general definition of what a home occupation is.
Right, but
And
I
I
was
think
just,
that we have to,
yeah, I was just trying to make sure that we're all going in the right direction, because why would we want to restrict it if that's not,
I don't want to restrict it, I don't want to increase it.
And I think an option would be, what I heard was you may not want them in the you know what I mean, in the apartments. So don't make it a permitted use in the high density district, in the medium density district. And Dean, looking at the zoning map, I think St. Clair is in the medium density.
Yeah.
So maybe you can get halfway there. You know, so you don't allow it in the apartments and in Pride and Preserve. In St. Clair, which is a medium density, you allow it. In the low density, you allow it as a permitted use. Because otherwise, if you put it a permanent use, you have to, in the high density, you have to let it in the apartments.
And I think the other thing to, I know one of your sensitivities, Jesse, is the impact on the staff, but if there's no permit, there's no impact. I mean, you're not creating work for we're not creating work for the staff. I would feel differently when you talk about the IUP home occupation.
so what about the idea of allowing it in the low density mixed use area and the medium density mixed use area and not allowing them in high density?
But I think Priners is high density, and I guess I'm just thinking if, again, it might depend on where we land on some of these other controls, but in my mind, if you have your little insurance business or whatever it is, and you're running it out of your home office, and you're the employee, and you can't have any outside employees, but we'll get down to that later. You're not creating any noise. There's no permit. Why do we care if it's an apartment or a house or a townhouse or whatever? You're not creating traffic. This is not working from home either. This is someone who has a business that they're running out of their home, but they're not, they're pretty much invisible, other than they might have a name plaque on their mailbox.
The current definition definitely gears towards a rural residential district because it allows for a 2-foot sign. It allows you to put a parking space in the accessory building. It's just built for different district. It's not built for a high density district. You know what I mean? The 9 criteria that just. So under today's rules, it wouldn't work because you can't get there.
If it's not.
It also doesn't explicitly outlaw it.
If it's non-permitted, why would we care?
Can't hear you.
If it's non-permitted, why would we care whether they work out of their home as a Blue Cross Blue Shield employee who's doing dispatch work out of an apartment complex? Why would we care about that?
I'm fine out of their home. I don't care to expand it into the apartment or the high density area. Okay, Jessica, let's move along. What's next?
We will table that for later discussion. The next definition is special home occupation, which will be just home occupation, interim use permit required. The last sentence mimics the current ordinance that says it's permitted on lots, shall not be permitted on lots less than 5 acres, and will only be permitted in the rural residential district. So right now, only rural residential cannot have a special home occupation with a permit on lots less than 5 acres. I also added a purpose statement that we can tweak at later times. I wanted to mention preventing competition with business districts because I know that's been a concern in the past, and looks like there's a typo there. Sorry about that. And add a statement that we're creating these procedures to allow home occupations without jeopardizing health, safety, and general welfare of the surrounding neighborhood. So I suppose the question to you all, if we are interested in keeping the 5-acre minimum and limiting to the rural residential district.
I say this is just fine. I'm in favor of keeping it like it is. Anyone else? Because all of our biggest problems come from the small lots, like in Rob's neighborhood where he's running a swimming pool factory and a junkyard.
And he leases, by the
lot.
way.
Huh?
He leases that property, by the way.
Yep, and that goes back to, that's a good point.
Again, we come back to, you're talking about density and the fact that there are some neighborhoods that have been developed where you've got a shotgun lots and you're right next to each other, just as if you were like in the cities, and then you got swampland or, some kind of land behind you, and you've got 5 acres. And then you've got places like Thornbeck, where some people got 2.5 acres and some people got 7.5 acres, so you better darn well have a lot big enough, the 7.5 acre, if you want to have a business, and that's going to be hard to explain to the guy that's next door that it has 2.5.
Oh, except he has covenants, so there's no business allowed in.
Well, I'm just giving that as an example. I mean, I don't know, there's other, areas in Columbus that have lots that are of different size next to each other. So I don't know where the 5 acre comes in. I think that it should be answered by the second portion of that, which is standards and procedures have been developed to allow home occupation without jeopardizing the health, safety, and general welfare. And we talked about, I think in some other area, the next one, it talks about odor, dust, noise, whatever. And that's what I think is the the crux of it, not necessarily how big the neighborhood is.
But by defining the 5-acre lots, you automatically get rid of the problems that will come with anybody who's on a 1, 2, or 3, or 4-acre lot. So you've eliminated that. We're trying to eliminate problems. That's the object of reviewing this and going through all this monkey business. So by having a 5-acre minimum, I don't care if it's a shotgun lot or a 5-square pasture or whatever it is, we are eliminating people moving into neighborhoods, renting. So that's just off the table. We're not saying you can't come to Columbus and you can't have your home occupation with an interim use permit. We're just saying you cannot do it on anything smaller than 5 acres. What's the downside?
I mean, I think Shelley, I think you do have a really valid point. I mean, I think about my neighborhood where we are, the lots are long and narrower. And, on one side of me, I'm as close to that person as I would be if I lived in Brooklyn Park. So I think you can probably add another layer to get to what Jesse's getting at. You could say, it has to be at least 5 acres, but then maybe you could also say it needs to be, and I don't know how you do that, if you have a width or can't operate one if you're within 300 feet of your neighbors, or I don't know. You'd have to pick some sort of number, but that would just whittle it down even more, Jesse. I mean, you'd start with a 5-acre minimum, but then you would also say, if your houses are bang, 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 maybe that eliminates it too.
I like that, because I think it does eliminate more. And Shelley, you're correct. You got a lot of lots that, like you say, you're like you're in Brooklyn Park, with a lot of the pencil lots we have, that the houses are that close. So you're really not doing much with a 5-acre minimum, but to increase it with a distance or something would minimize the problems that we're trying to avoid. And it makes it more restrictive.
So
it would be.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
It would be something like the location where the home occupation is being operated must be at least 300 feet from the nearest dwelling.
I don't know what words you'd use. I'm just throwing that on as, I don't know how far my neighbor is, but I mean, I'm just thinking that 5-acre can be the first cut, and then, if I was running a, I don't know what business, and I was, using my garage or my pole barn, which I don't have, and that, it would be a nuisance to my neighbors, let's just say that. I don't think I could do it where I live. You could do it if you were at Shelley's house, because she's way back with nothing around her, and you never even see it or hear it. She's, on the, so I think the configuration of the lot has to be considered as well, and that's where I'm coming from. I don't have a specific number for you to plug in, but that's.
Okay, well, why don't we add this to the list to talk about when we consider things like where the business can be conducted from, whether it has to be just in the dwelling unit or if it can be in an accessory building. Let's table this to that meeting discussion and leave the 5 acre minimum in the special home occupation definition for now. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Did you look and see, are all the other cities, did anybody else have those kind of restrictions on lot size?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing I saw is that they had several different residential zones that were defined that way. So they might not have said, you have to have so much space between your neighbors, but they might have called that rural, RR1 or RR2 or RR3, and certain things were permitted in one type of rural residential, but not in others. And it was often, those districts were often defined by lot configuration or size.
Okay.
Okay, I have one more question then about the 5 acres. You had told us that, when things got platted out in Columbus, that there were people that got shorted, So are we talking about 4.92 or?
4.75. I think, just for food for thought, I'm thinking, I think we need to think more outside the box. And I'll give you an example. You can have a 20-acre lot, and when it comes to a house, you might only be able to put it in one place. And while you have lots of acres, 80% of it could be wetland, and the only place you have is one place for a house, one place for a septic system. So it's the rules that dictate where they can put their house and where they can put their septic system, not the size of the lot. So I think if you're going to regulate home occupations with design criteria and or setback criteria, think about the criteria that should be put in place versus how big the lot is. Because in a lot of cases, it won't matter how big the lot is. It will matter whether they can meet the criteria that you set. Because today, that's how the zoning code is driven when you place a house and a septic system. It's not, yes, you have a 5 acre minimum, but essentially it's the setbacks and whether you can get a septic system and whether you can meet all that for the house. But you have other things, the other factors influencing it. And I think what Sue was starting to say is, okay, are we going to think outside the box, and are we going to create criteria that will drive less public nuisance in big picture and not so much the size of the lot?
I think that's a really good point, Elizabeth, because you can imagine having 2 40-acre parcels, right, that 2 different people own, but the only high spot is right here, and the property line goes right through it. So there might be 2 homes that are really close to each other, but they own 40 acres. So should they not be allowed to have a home occupation? Another question for another time, I think, if we're okay with moving on to the next couple questions I have, just to keep us moving along. Any other thoughts on that, keeping the 5 acre minimum for now? Coming back to the distance between dwellings question for a future meeting.
That sounds good. And that's what I meant by configuration.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I also, you said saving 5 acre minimum for now. I strongly suggest we leave that in for permanently, because that just eliminates all of the issue of their whole neighborhood.
But I
And
think
many
what
other-
Elizabeth was saying is that the other restrictions that we put on it's not going to matter what the size of the lot is, or if it's a renter, or if it's how far.
But this is just as simple as a simpleton could understand. Oh, I only bought 2 acres. I can't do it. End of discussion. You don't have to measure, you don't have to set back, you don't have to nothing. 5 acre minimum, you can't do it.
Right.
And add the rest of the stuff too. I agree completely. So anyway,
So one of
please
the-
consider leaving that in. It's a simple explanation. Anybody can understand it. Okay, go on, Justin.
This is why I have a concern that if we keep tabling each part that we review without making decisions or direction one way or the other, then we're not going to accomplish our goals in the time frame that we think we should. It's almost like, this is like the third time we've had a topic tabled in the time that we've started talking about this. And so how history would tell you that that's only going to continue as we go through this. So how do we get to a point where we can make decisions and move on? It may not be the right decision 5 years from now, but it's the right decision today. We have to take the information we have today and make good, sound decisions. And if we keep tabling all these discussion items, we're not going to get our moratorium complete with all the information we need to make a decision. So that's my comment.
I really appreciate that, Bob. What I'm trying to do with the tabling stuff is if there is something that we're going to talk about at a later meeting that, you know, if we go down this question about configuration of the lots and how far we want the distance to be between dwelling units, for example, then we're opening up a can of worms of, do we want to allow accessory buildings with home occupations? What square footage of the accessory building? Do we want to allow outdoor storage? Do we want to limit it just to the dwelling unit? So I'm trying to be cognizant of questions that are being raised that would fit better when we're talking about other things. I think it would be a good idea to answer the mixed use and rural residential high density question tonight, but that's what I'm trying to do with this configuration question, is to save it for a time when we're talking about more similar control measures.
Point taken. Very well.
So do you suggest that we have a consensus tonight on the high density and mixed density? So you can
I think the
cross-
more we can, yeah, I mean, the more we can cross off the list, the better. You know, we're still at meeting 1. If we come down to it after a while and say, hey, we made a mistake on this, later on, we can change it. We still have 5 more meetings. I think it would be a good idea, since we're talking tonight about overall definitions and the big picture, our overarching purpose statements and definitions, that it fits into that question.
Okay, then let's have a little voting session here. So I say eliminate it from the high density and the medium density.
Are we talking home occupation, no IUP?
Can't hear you, Jim.
Are we talking home occupation, no IUP?
Correct.
What are you talking about? Is that, okay, so that's what you're referring to, Jesse?
So does everybody understand the question?
So,
Okay.
so that would be any occupation within that dwelling. That'd be any occupation within that dwelling, is what you're saying?
Yes,
Conditions, isn't there?
on the high
What
density
meets that
in the apartment buildings
You
and in the
still
Pioneer
have to meet
Preserve.
a criteria to be a.
Okay.
So are we all clear on the question? Chris, or you keep track, please, Jessica? This is the vote.
Okay.
Chris, what do you think?
I just want to clarify something. We're talking about a non-permanent home occupation.
Correct.
And that would be in there. Now, right now, with our existing ordinance, there's certain criteria that has to be met to be a home occupation. You cannot just be, anything that comes into that house can be a home occupation,
No,
correct?
there is 9 criteria. And I'm
Okay.
very specific about it. And if they can't meet that 9 criteria, then they're not a home occupation and they can't have that use. So then that's why I say there is criteria, even though it's permitted, there is criteria that they have to meet.
And we are going to keep criteria that they have to meet in order to do it. And
Yes.
In the residential zone, or in the rural residential,
for a home occupation, non-permitted.
Non-permitted.
Yeah.
correct?
The permitted home occupation is throughout the entire city. It's the residential zone business that is only, today,
Right.
that is only in the rural residential district, which now I'm equating the residential zone business to the home occupation IUP.
Yes. So my vote would be to include it in those areas with the criteria that's set. So I don't have a problem with it. As long as it's within
Okay.
those walls and it's invisible and it's as it is now.
Shelley?
I agree.
Sue?
I agree with Chris, if that's what that it would be anywhere, any district.
Ron?
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Same.
I agree.
Okay, you got that, Jessica?
You didn't vote.
I do not agree, but apparently everybody else does.
So the consensus is that a home occupation without a permit required will be allowed in rural residential, high, low, and medium density
Correct.
Yes.
mixed use.
As
Okay.
long as it's remaining inside the four walls of the home.
And meets the
Right.
criteria.
However we define a home occupation without a permit in later meetings, that's what will be allowed.
Thank you, Jessica.
Correct.
So there, yep.
And what I understand you just say earlier, Jessica, is if we define it and all of a sudden we feel maybe we want to revisit the zones, we can. Because now there's some
I think-
other extenuating circumstances.
I think we're going to have a lot to talk about in these future meetings. And if there might be something we stumble across and say, hey, I didn't think about that, let's go back and change the definition. So, okay.
Yay, we made our first decision.
Good job, guys.
Anything
So
else?
the next thing we want to talk about, I'm just going to breeze through this one. Item 3 under the recommendation for definitions, I say the following standards would be applied to both types of home occupations and can be adjusted throughout the moratorium as needed. So these are different control measures that I saw nearly every ordinance had. The stuff about not creating odor, dust, noise, clearly incidental and secondary to residential use, no equipment that can create electrical interference, you must comply with city nuisance code, shall not require internal or external alterations, etc. And the owner of the home occupation shall reside in the home associated with the home occupation. That we'll come back to that a little bit after we talk to Bill and get some legal advice about renters and home occupations. I think that as we are envisioning the way the ordinance will come out, think of this section as a general section that will apply to all home occupations. So as we're talking through in the next few meetings with control measures, if there's something that we think is just so broad and overarching and should apply to all home occupations, we will add it to this list. So I suppose I'm asking maybe tonight if there aren't any super pressing discussion points on that, we can move on to question number 2.
Shall we have a vote on this?
Hold on. I didn't see anything that talked about traffic. It says, shall not change the residential character, but we don't have anything in here on traffic, like.
I imagine that traffic will be a part of, I'm not sure which meeting I have it under, but I think that that's going to be a major discussion at a future time. And if
Meeting 3. Yeah.
What?
Yep. Meeting 3, we talk about that
All
one.
right. And then the last point says the owner of the home occupation reside in the home associated with the home occupation. Did we not just say we weren't going to ask for that?
That's what we're going to ask Bill, correct?
Yep.
we're going to talk, the legal ramifications of having a renter own a home home occupation or somebody who's not the property owner own a home occupation.
So I don't see how we can vote on that if that's in there.
Right.
So I think you just want to restrict the consensus to the prior, the bullet points before that one that we have to get legal counsel on, correct?
Right. I don't know that we need to have a vote on this right now. I think we could leave this as like kind of a running list that we could leave open for editing as we go through the rest of the meetings. Or you can have a vote on it too.
This is Bob. I have a comment on that first bullet point. Shall not create odor, dust, noise, etc. Can we add the word visual?
Where would you add it?
I would agree.
To me, a nuisance can be visual as well as being heard, and all of it's subjective. It just depends on the severity of the nuisance. So it seems like if you're gonna have a business and you're gonna run a bunch of trucks right up to the border and park it, you know, that's a visual nuisance to me, because
It's a good point. I can agree with that, Bob.
But I think that falls under the city's nuisance code, which is already one of the bullet points.
But why not add it? It's straight out on the first
could also
page.
be defined as other nuisances, but then it seems like this is such an obvious one that it would make sense just to add it.
Could it say
Couldn't you
something like
insert-
other nuisances, including visual obstructions or visual something?
I was going to say like other nuisances, visual or otherwise.
Okay, pencil that in. That's a good one.
That sounds good.
Same.
Okay.
Again, I look at that as the visual especially is something about affecting the surrounding residential area as far as values and stuff like that versus smell or sound or vibrations.
Add
I
that
also imagine that we'll have a very lengthy discussion about parking and what type of parking is allowed and what type of outdoor storage is allowed. So when we're talking about visual nuisances, not only will this statement eliminate or not allow visual nuisances, I'm hoping that we will develop very detailed rules about how many and what type of vehicles can be parked on a property, and if there's outdoor storage, where it can be located, how many square feet are allowed, things like that. So I think it's a good idea to have just this other visual nuisances broad catch-all, but also anticipate in a future meeting that we're going to dig down really in the nitty-gritty and figure out what we want in terms of vehicle storage and outdoor storage.
All right, continue.
Okay. This was an interesting one for me. So the question is, should there be one set of rules for all businesses in the rural residential district? Or should there be more than one set of rules for different types of properties in the rural residential district? And I understand we just expanded that for a home occupation, no permit. But I want this to be just about special home occupations or home occupations with a permit. Okay. So some cities, Lino Lakes, I believe, comes to mind immediately. They have 3 different levels of home occupations that require a permit: level A, level B, level C. And each level has a different set of rules. That's one way to organize this ordinance. Another way to organize this ordinance would be through categories within control measures. So option 1 is what I explained previously: level A, level B, level C. I put on the memo level 1 and level 2. So you have a list of what's allowed in each level. Option 2 is where you can have, in general, the city of Columbus will have one type of home occupation that requires a permit. However, what you're allowed to do within each control measure depends on certain things. Like, for example, with storage, I chose acreage to categorize what's allowed and what's not. For traffic, I chose gravel road versus paved road. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm not asking you all to have a discussion on the specific control measures tonight, but more so, how do we want to organize home occupations that require a permit? And it would be my recommendation to go with option 2, because it leaves a little bit more flexibility. And with option 1, I'm not sure how else we would distinguish between the different levels other than acreage. And I keep thinking about the example of there's people with 40 acres that are on gravel roads, and there are people with 40 acres on paved roads. And you probably want different rules for traffic on those types of properties. So in my mind, my recommendation, option 2, gives a little bit more flexibility, and we can create subcategories of the home occupation with a permit within each control measure.
I agree. Option 2.
This is Bob, I agree. Option 2.
Rob, option 2.
Barb, option 2.
I agree, option 2.
Yeah, I agree too.
Yeah, I agree. Option 2.
I'll agree with option
Cool.
Are you just giving this as an example with the 10 acres, or are you really mean 10 acres?
Yeah.
Am I the only one that's going to be able to have?
No,
An example.
just an example. And you know, we will keep in mind that we still have that 5-acre minimum in the broad definition.
Okay.
So we'll think about it. I mean, you can do things like 5 to 10 acres, 10 to 15, 15 to 20. You know, we can do whatever we want, and that's the beauty of option 2, is however we think we want to handle that within each type of control measure, we can go that route. And like I put with the storage example, Elizabeth and I were talking about this. You know, maybe we want to have exceptions as well. Maybe. I know that there is, the council and the planning commission are on a full spectrum of angles and opinions on this, but there are options with selecting this route. So I think it's a better way to go. Any other thoughts on that? That's just going to be helpful as we organize our thoughts going forward. The last question I have, should the city have a list of business types that are prohibited in the residential district? I think this would, you know, I think that we could have a list of prohibited businesses for home occupations without a permit, and a separate list for prohibited businesses for home occupations with a permit, or we could have one big, just none of these are allowed. But my question to you is, do we want to have that list of blanketed prohibitions for residential businesses?
Oh, this is Chris, I think yes.
This is Bob, I think, yes.
Yes.
This is
Sue,
Rob.
yes.
I say yes, and maybe we tie it into some sort of land as well, how much land you have per what type of business.
Sure.
Say it's an excavating business and you have 100 acres, but nobody sees it, you know, something along those lines.
This is Barb. I agree that we need a list of prohibitive business types.
I agree.
Okay.
Yes, prohibited.
I agree also.
And I agree.
Do we want to take a few minutes to brainstorm what these might be without
Okay,
committing
hold
to
on
anything?
just a second, because we didn't get down to
sorry.
this end. Okay.
Oh, I'm
When
sorry.
you say that you're going to have a list of prohibited business types, does that mean then that anybody that comes in with something brand new that we haven't thought of, then, oops, that is automatically okay?
No, a list of prohibited businesses means if it's on the list, it's prohibited. You know what I mean? So it's only on the list. So if something that is brand new and it's not on the list, it's still it's still on the table.
I know
Sure.
what Shelley's saying, though. I think you're getting to the whole like permitted, like if you don't see it on our list of conditional uses or permitted uses, then it's not. I mean, so.
This is
it's-
just the reverse, because
Yes,
this is.
that's what, I
the
think that's what
opposite.
she wanted assurances. This is the
Yes,
reverse of
This
that.
is just the opposite, yes. So if
Okay.
it's on this list, it's excluded.
If it's on the list, don't even ask.
Right,
s-
it's,
Right.
like, in other words, if someone came to me and, I'm gonna build explosives, and we had, no munitions, build, that type of business in there, I would say, nope, can't have that in there. Now, Jessica showed me that there were, on some of the other lists was firearms, and I had to explain to her that I've already permitted 3. So, we have people that, build, gun parts, and they've been vetted through ATF and everything else, and met all of the requirements, and all the paperwork was done, and so, while others, prohibit it, we didn't have that prohibition, and they met the 9 criteria. They, like I said, they've been vetted, spoke to everyone who needed to be done, and they're doing their business today.
I think we
Didn't
could
know
put
that,
some
huh?
kind of language in there too, like not limited to or limited to, just to
I'm
kind of
part of the
keep it
NRA, so-
open.
It's okay.
So Jessica, back to you. You're asking us to think right now for, start the list?
I don't want to open a can of worms, but I think I would like to hear from everybody if they have like 1 or 2 that they feel really passionate about not allowing in the residential district, that we could, keep at the top of our minds as we go through the rest of these meetings, not to vote on and say it's for sure going to be in there, just to throw it on the table now so that we can, as we go through these control measures and think, okay, maybe there is a way that we can allow, I'm just going to throw it out there, that maybe there is a way that we can allow motor vehicle repair if we have X, Y, and Z control measure. But if you have that business type or others that you're really passionate, don't think it should be allowed, I think it would be a good idea just to put it on the table now, and I'll keep a list.
Okay, anybody have anything that you're,
I have one question, and this is Chris. You bring up about motor vehicle repair and that. Part of what we want is for some of these businesses to go to our commercial district, don't we? I mean, is that not really what we want? And certain businesses just do not belong in a residential area. And I think that's a perfect example of one that does not. And they would need to be in a commercial area.
Who?
Auto
What business?
mechanics, painter,
Oh.
for auto painters, service, RV service, whatever, any type of business like that, I believe should be in a commercial area. So that would be on my list.
Chris, I think you make a good point too, because the people that are in that commercial district are put at a disadvantage by the individuals that are working out of their garage, right?
Correct, and we got 2 different tax bases and everything else, and, one thing I remember when I was doing my research was we do not want to encourage home businesses, permitted home businesses, to be in a residential area when they should be in a commercial district. And I 100% agree with that. Now, we have people in my neighborhood that work on their vehicles, and that's distracting enough. I can't imagine having people doing it for a living next door. So that would be on my list right away.
Okay,
And you
this
don't
is
have
Shelley.
another one? Please, you don't have another one? Please? Like excavating, maybe?
Excavating is one. I have a list here from another community, and they had, rental businesses. They had contracting, excavating, welding, or machine shops, commercial kennels, veterinarian clinics. All these places should be in a commercial area. Tow truck service. And how defined do we need to get?
Well, and this is Shelley, and unfortunately, I'm on the opposite side of that fence. I don't think that, I personally don't feel a need to protect local businesses from, competition. I have people in my neighborhood that fix cars, and as a matter of fact, I've lived there since 1981, and until about 15 years ago, I didn't even know they were there. It's a word of mouth, type situation, run very well, and I know that there were other businesses in Columbus that had special dispensation in the past, to run businesses. And again, if they're not, if they've met all the criteria that we've talked about with the noise and the odor and the dust and the traffic and all that sort of thing, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't be able to do that, as long as everybody else feels the same way in the neighborhood. I consider it a benefit in our neighborhood to have somebody that can work on our cars and that we trust, so.
But Shelley, the ordinance change wouldn't affect those guys. The guy who you bring your car to down the road, or that junk guy or something. This is for new oncoming people. Am I correct, everybody?
I don't know. I still think the city should take a look at businesses that are operating illegally. Yeah. I mean, I've said that for years. I
don't have a problem with them getting an IUP. What I have a problem with is saying you can't be there. And I really think that we're getting into a situation where there are more and more people working from home for whatever their talents, have and or point them toward. And I think that we have to be open for that. And I think that's why people move to Columbus. I mean, Elizabeth has said many times that this is happening more and more. And as long as they don't bug their neighbors, I don't see what the problem is. And our job is to make sure they don't bug their neighbors by having enough ordinance, pieces in there to control them. And so I'm on the opposite side of that. And I know I'm on the opposite side from you, and I think you.
Well,
just to go, there are 3 businesses that I think you should think about. First of all, and visually think about. I have nothing against Olson Sewer Service.
Yep.
I think they're a fabulous business. But when you have an excavating business next to, or that kind of business next to residential, you inherently have a lot of complaints. The other business that had a lot of, John's Black Dirt, inherently a lot of complaints, a lot of heartache over that. Again, I think you really have to think long and hard about that type of business. The other business that we get complaints again is a dumpster business. Again, I think there are certain businesses that inherently, just because of the nature of their business, they create public nuisance, and there's no way to abate it. We tried.
It didn't work.
We tried so hard with John's Black Dirt to abate it as best we can, and it didn't work. And we made it through 4 years, but I don't know if we would have made it. We wouldn't have made it very much longer if we had to do that. So I think they're just inherently, and I agree with you, there are some that you can put conditions on and it will work beautifully. But we've had a couple of them that no matter what we did, it didn't work in the residential district.
Okay, but I came to this city and John's Black Dirt was in position, and I believe Olson's was too. John's Black Dirt changed. They had 1 truck going out a day, because I was the one that asked them, in 1983. And then they got taken over. I don't know what happened, but Forest Lake got involved with it, Forest Lake Excavator, or whatever their name was. They got involved. So that morphed into something.
Yep.
So if we have in here that, you can only have however many truck trips or whatever, or with Olson's, again, they morphed. They were a septic pumping system, and then they turned around and said, oh, we got all these mound systems that are going in, let's do excavation. Well, you've morphed, and we can have things that, stop that from happening. So in every case that I see, I don't know the other business, but in every case that I've seen, as long as you have something in place, it isn't like you can say, no, we're not going to,
This is Chris, but the problem is once it's in there, It's hard to control. And until we hire a compliance officer in this city and we go after the complaints and go after people that aren't compliant, we always stand the chance that it's going to morph. And that's where it creates problems with the people. And then we're sitting here doing nothing about it, like your neighborhood.
Except the IUP would indicate what they are able to do. And, you know, we were talking, originally, we talked about having the IUP for 2 years. If there are no complaints, you know, then we go every 5 years, and then, you know, it's reviewed. And as long as you don't have complaints, you don't have a problem. So, you know, you pull their IUP, they're out of business.
So, ladies, let me break in, please. But the problem, the way to stop it before it's a problem is not allow it. So they have a good business, oh, can't we just do a little mound system on the side? Next thing you know, the neighbors are rioting. Elizabeth is spending weeks and weeks we spent years on John's Black Dirt and thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars. Just say no. The people who are here can do what they're doing until they die off, and the new people can buy the lot, build their nice house. And I'm all for freedom. I've worked independently my whole life. But we never caused too much trouble, and we followed the rules, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But look ahead 20 years. Why extend the agony? Just wind it down.
So I'd like to make a suggestion. I think we should think about this. I like the way you defined it, like what are the businesses that you could not put conditions on to mitigate the nuisance? That really should be the definition. And to Shelley's point, you know, some of the cities that I've looked at use conditions or controls to segregate what's okay. So for instance, with the car repair shop, you know, some of them will say, no, we can't do it. But some will say, well, if you do less than 8 cars a day or 2 cars a day or whatever it is, then you can, because then you're not creating unfair competition to the guys that are in the commercial. You're such a small operator that it's not creating. So, I mean, I think we can think about maybe in the situations where like the working on cars is a problem, it has to be inside, it has to do whatever. And then maybe that you know, that addresses the control. But I think the only thing I can think of is the munitions thing. Like, I don't want a bomb-making factory anywhere in Columbus. So you know.
But if they're licensed and legal, I'm all in favor of it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
But damn it, don't let them be running an insurance shop out of an apartment.
It's no more ridiculous than allowing it to happen.
Well, here's why I'm saying, let's think about it, because I think you could, I have to think about it. I can't really come up with a list off the top of my head that now I feel comfortable with, because I think, you know, I think there are ways to allow some things without creating nuisances. I think there's probably others that you are never going to be able to, and I like that definition, but I had never thought about it that way.
And I think right now, and Jessica, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're just kind of coming up with some, just some ideas for potential businesses. Right now, we're not necessarily debating whether or not we will have this list. So, like, to your point, I mean, and I think Jessica brought this up earlier too, maybe we put motor vehicle repair or excavating on the list, but we find maybe there is good purpose to put it under certain circumstances. So I think right now we are just kind of starting this process. We're not necessarily at the final stage, so.
Good point.
Good point.
Put bomb making.
Yeah.
Shelley, do you
Well,
have
and
businesses that you would not entertain?
I'm sorry?
Do you have any businesses that you would not entertain?
Nope.
You'd let us somebody make a bomb next door?
What'd you say? They were vetted? They on?
No, I'm not talking about guns. I'm talking about bombs.
All right, Jess, let's move it along.
sounds great, y'all. I think that was a good point, Janet, and I think Elizabeth, and I'm not sure whoever said it was a good point, that the question is, are there businesses that you do not think that we can regulate through other control measures that we should just flat out not allow? So think on that, stew on it. I believe in my packet that I gave you tonight has on the cities, I included the prohibited business types for each city, so you can see what other cities are not regulating through other means and just flat out prohibiting. I appreciate all of the conversation tonight. I think we have a really good start, and I'm excited to move on to the next meeting, which will be July 20th, and it will be a planning commission meeting with city council input, where I will be sending policy questions to the council members ahead of time to give their input to the planning commission to help facilitate a little bit of back and forth without actually having a joint meeting. That's all I have.
That's it? Only 9
Thank
o'clock.
you,
Those were the,
Jessica.
Nice
those were the
job,
three
Jessica.
questions.
Good job.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, Elizabeth, I have a question for you. At the July 20th Planning Commission meeting, so this was a great discussion, and I think everything happened like it should, like we all envisioned and like intelligent input. Can the chairman give us a blanket acknowledgement? So you four, us here, you're sitting right there.
If you get a Bible, I'll swear on it.
There's a six-pack in it for you.
Okay.
And it won't be a joint meeting, but we are, I mean, just to speed it up and cut the,
I think that on the 20th, the way the schedule is right now, I do believe that there's going to be a public hearing on the 20th.
Yep.
So that's why I was saying there has to be a component to the planning commission, but I don't know that there's not a reason why on the agenda we couldn't say, we're going to talk about the residential zone business, and it will be a joint, a joint discussion, recognizing council members they're in attendance. And that's what I was saying. It has to be a planning commission because I need a public hearing. But again, if you have a joint discussion, that format will work fine if the planning commission chair recognizes everybody, which he kind of nodded, said that he would.
and Jessica would be back on with all of her points and pages and all of this, so it'd be basically the same thing.
And there might be yet another discussion because we need to start the Lake Drive. I mean, that's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? We need to start yet the other discussion. So there's going to be multiple things on the agenda where we'll go over these points and try to facilitate the discussions because we're going to try to do them concurrently.
Good. All right. Next issue is, we already did the public open forum, planning commissioners report. Chris?
Just a couple things. I'm just kind of wondering where the billboards are at. I noticed like the one company that did the half, they got the one Columbus sign up, but they've never put the second one up. And are they going to finish that? And then I thought we were having, Clear Channel, I thought they were on to update theirs. Is that still a go, or where's that at?
Well, I'll have to check that. I know that Out Front only had 2 left. They took the others down.
Right,
And
they have 2, but they have, where they have the Columbus sign, they only have it on 1.
They're both on 35E.
Yep.
Oh, and it's not on another one?
No, it's on
Nope,
35.
just on the 1.
Okay, so there is missing a sign.
Yep.
Okay.
So I was just curious about that. Then the other item I'm kind of curious on, I've gone down Lake Drive quite a bit, and forgive me, I can't remember the company that bought CST.
Universal?
Okay. Part of their CUP is to do landscaping, fencing, and all that stuff. Now we're into the end of June, and I haven't seen any activity. When we issue the cup, is there a time frame that they have to start making their modifications so that they get it in this year, or?
They have 1 year.
They have 1 year.
They have 1 year.
Okay.
Which group was that?
Universal, the one who bought CST?
Okay.
The old
Yeah, I
chipper?
thought about that yesterday when I
Does they have
drove by.
junk out there?
There's no landscaping
You don't see
yet.
any
No.
movement there, but work.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I
But
brought
weren't they
that
going
up
to
last
fence?
meeting.
Pardon
I
me?
think I brought that up last meeting as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's been no change. I
No.
don't think the light's been shrouded, anything like that.
Anything else, Chris?
No, that would be it. Oh,
Shelley.
just Loves is moving along really nice.
Shelley?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing?
Do you want to talk about, are you going to update on the hiring stuff?
You go ahead. Good.
Really quick, we all know Frank. Frank got hired. We had an interview today for a planning tech, and we'll be making a recommendation to the council for next Wednesday's meeting. And we are interviewing on Friday an accountant for hire, not a consultant. That looks good on paper. So whoever made that prayer, it was answered, and someone came our way, and we will see how it all goes.
Wonderful.
No report.
Nothing to report too, but can you extend that prayer to the planning commission vacancy?
I know, yes, I agree.
And the park board?
And the EDA and the park board too. Have you guys talked about that at all, Chris? Is there any interest yet from anybody?
And anybody.
In the events committee.
We got our trees up and it was under budget.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, well, not really. Oh, well, you know what? I don't think the park board knows.
Of the extra tree?
They bought an extra tree.
I know.
Oh, okay.
But I still got the invoice from Rum River the other day and I forwarded it on to Jim and it was like $6,300, which is under.
Okay, so is it still?
Yay.
Yeah. And that was with the extra tree, so.
Okay.
Cool.
So it was lower than originally planned because I think we were given 65 and then Jim asked for another 500.
You guys drive a hard bargain.
Well, they look nice.
They do look really nice.
Good job.
I have nothing special except for Frank. Why don't you stand up and introduce yourself, first and last name to everybody? So Frank replaces Ben. He's a little taller. He's got a little more hair. He's a little bit younger, but he's been here almost 2 weeks now. 10 days.
A week and 3 days.
A week and 3 days. So tell us who you are and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name's Frank Cannon, I'm the new associate planner here.
Hold
in
it,
Columbus.
Canaan?
Canaan, yep.
Canaan, all right.
Yeah, I'm originally from Lake St. Croix Beach, Minnesota. I went to the University of Minnesota, and yeah, I'm really excited about all the opportunities here in Columbus and working with everyone. So yeah, I look forward to future meetings.
All right, thank you.
And I hear you're moving closer. Is it this weekend that you're moving?
Yep, this weekend I should be moving, so.
Oh, okay.
There we go. All right. So the attendance at the city council will be Chris King.
Seriously?
Attendance at city council on 6/22. Yep. So that's next Wednesday.
But she doesn't have to because we're all here, right? We did that last time, didn't we?
I think she has to do something for the record, is that right?
What, yeah.
Oh, it's recorded.
For the public.
Oh,
What else do you have to do on Wednesday night?
Lots.
So, okay, well, it's up to you. I'll be here. And I'll make the motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
This is Chris, I'll second it.
And, before we finish, so this was a lot of work, everybody. Thank you. And, you know, this will last for 20 years, hopefully, when we all get all done with it. And it won't matter anyway. So if there's no other discussion, I'll call for the vote.
Chris, aye.
Shelley, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye?
Janet, I.
Barb, aye.
Rob, aye.
Bye-bye.
Jesse, aye. This meeting is adjourned.